call the meeting to order. I'll start by talking about meeting logistics. Anyone who's joining remotely, we ask you to change your name display on your screen to your first and last name so we know who's talking to us and who we're talking to. Anyone who speaks, we would ask you to start by stating your name and where you live. We would ask everyone to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And if you're speaking about a specific agenda item, please keep your comments germane to the topic at hand. Anyone who wishes to speak must be called on by the mayor. Once you're called on by the mayor, you may make a statement or ask questions, but we want you to get all of your statements and questions out at one time so that, because the general council generally does not engage in back and forth at those times. And anyone who speaks out of turn makes non-germane comments or goes over your time will be called upon to adjust your comments or behavior. First item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Any comments or suggestions?
Mr. Mayor, I'd ask that we move the necessity resolution to next meeting. There's a couple of errors in the wording. I want to make sure I get it clean and correct.
Okay, great. We'll do that. Anything else? All right, we'll consider the agenda approved. Next up, we have general business and appearances. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the council on any topic that is not on the tonight's agenda. As with other sections of the meeting, we require you to be recognized by the mayor, and then we'll ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. During the for people, we've got a new setup for the room here, and so we have a table out front for people who wish to who are in person, who are wishing to address the council. And so the floor is open for people. Dave Bellini, I see you're up first, so you can start out. Again, we're talking about topics that are not on tonight's agenda, so that means not the budget.
Not the budget. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I couldn't find the agenda, and if there's handouts, I couldn't find them online. So if there was something that was going to be presented by the city manager or the mayor, I couldn't find it. I don't know if there is. I'd like to thank you. I noticed you too late that you're holding it at the high school, so I would have attended in person. Thank you for doing that. It makes it more accessible. I think it's a better room. So not about the budget. That's later on, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, we will be. The main topic tonight is the public hearing on the budget.
Well, I thought this is not the public hearing on the budget then, this part.
Right.
All right. Could we see the budget survey, the narratives that were written? I noticed that wasn't included. Remember that budget survey a while back? It was kind of a difficult survey where you rank things in order one way and then you rank them in order another way. But there were questions on there that asked for a narrative answer, and I think that would be helpful to find out where people were coming from. So if that's possible, I would appreciate that. And
I believe they're all posted on the city's website. So.
Yeah, okay. Well, there you go. I'm just a computer failure. Sorry about that. And I just want to thank the city council for moving in a more fiscally responsible direction. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Anyone else online who wishes to be heard during general business and appearances, please. It'd be best to use your electronic hand on the screen because I'm pretty sure I'll see that. Anybody in the room who wishes to address the council? Steve Whitaker.
Glad I made it on time. I need to turn this volume off because I'm getting echo out of the machine. Not supposed to touch it. Vibrant. Couple things. There's overdue records requests for the Good Samaritan correspondence around why they didn't open on the 16th the night we gave them $45,000. And the terms of the memorandum of agreement or understanding with the churches. That's like $900 and something a day, or when combined with the state funds I raised with the Commissioner of Children and Families, who's providing the other funds that we didn't provide. But my point is, and I've made it again and again, when we hand money out to nonprofits with no conditions on transparency or accountability, here's a perfect example. Here we are in a real tight budget and we just hand out $45,000 and we don't get what we're paying for. And so the folks, their folks are crowding in the library and people want to complain about the libraries. It's like they're picking up the slack for y'all's dysfunction on providing a place for the unhoused to gather and or, but they're fighting and arguing and cussing each other out and getting banned from there, et cetera. So again, y'all created this mess by neglecting it for so long, and I will not let you forget that. And I think your toilets committee, when did it last meet? There's a simple example. So City Hall says signs on the door closes at 4:30. The bus doesn't pick the folks up going to the shelter till 6 or 6:30. And we made no provision, even when it was 0 degrees, for where these folks are going to stay indoors for 2 hours. There's no reason that with the hallway doors locked down to the council chambers, that the front clerk's office locked, city manager's office locked, those bathrooms could be accessible to those folks waiting indoors. This is just simple sympathy, logic, responsibility, compassion that we put all over in our strategic plan and then don't live up to. Similarly, there's discussion about building a budget from the bottom up or engaging with the public earlier, because by the time the budget reaches this stage and you've got a tight timeline of 2 weeks to get 2 public hearings in, it's pretty much tinkering with icing on the cake. If we're going to remodel the budget, you need to take public input and even start from a zero-based budget or take public input a lot sooner in the process, because it really feels like going through the motions here, especially when I made a bunch of comments and specific suggestions and they didn't get discussed even.
Thank you. So anybody else in the room who wishes to be heard? Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. No, I don't see anything on the consent agenda. Oh, there is some consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. We'll then move to the main item on the agenda tonight, the first public hearing on the budget. I will declare the open the public hearing, and we'll start with a presentation.
Mayor, is it possible to spin one of these speakers so people over here can hear this? Well, people right behind me can't hear, and I can't hear. I'm just saying, I'm looking out for more than myself. They have more contact.
Folks, can you hear over there? Okay. This is a new setup for meetings in this room, and to me, it seems better. So
Okay,
I hope to hear from people if there are issues.
what's that? Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members of the public. This is our first public hearing on the budget that, I guess at the last meeting, you gave us direction to reduce the budget by a certain amount of funds, 409,400. So this is a budget showing those reductions. This is the longer presentation. I'll shorten it up for next week, but this is kind of going back to where we were at the beginning, just for refresh everyone's memory and for folks that are coming into the process now, kind of how we got here, what's on our table, and where we're at. So we always start with budget goals, and those are to implement our strategic plan priorities, increase the investment in the capital plan, prioritize public safety and public works, and keep the tax rate as low as possible. I'm not going to read all these, but we do have a strategic plan, fairly lengthy. It's got 5 main categories. We'll go through those, and then strategies in each one. And obviously, as we built the budget, we kept in mind to this, although certainly the financial resources this year were pretty limited in terms of being able to address a lot of the issues. So why was the budget so tough this year? Because it certainly was the hardest one we've had in my time, that's for sure. So our operating costs, just, when we start with everything on the table, we're up about $360,000. We cut a bunch of things last year that I think, hoped were going to be one-time cuts and could be restored. Those were close to $900,000. Our capital needs pent up was about $1.2 million. We had wages up, but really the big one, of course, was health insurance up 23% for $580,000. And that our related employer costs, FICA, Medicare, overtime. And then we had our grand list appeals, settlements, things people appealed their taxes. They had tax abatements, and we had the National Life settlement. So that all hit our grand list, our budget, by about $145,000. So we started off with kind of in the hole about $3.7 million from last year. So if we meeting that we needed about $2.85 million in new tax dollars, which would have been a 24% increase, which I don't think anybody was seriously considering. But that's where we started. So that was the challenge. There were a lot of things: declined revenues, delayed inflation. Last year, we had a very large school increase, which meant the overall tax increase in the city was high. So people are feeling that. We have the lingering impact of the reappraisal. So folks who just had their values raised and then just got the big tax bill last year are feeling it. We continue to have increase in service demand. So even though funding is tight, the work doesn't go away. So how do we deal with that? And then we have a very large number of projects on our plate, including all our flood recovery. So trying to make all those things happen with very tight funds. So our initial budget showed us this is the current one. Sarah, this is the new one? Yes, okay. So our newest budget shows that we have our expenses up 5%, our revenues up 7%. So the tax dollars needed at this point are only 2.33% for the city's portion of the budget. 1.85 of that is for capital, and 0.47% is for the operating. The rest is in ballot items. And then here's where the rest of it is. So we have the library mosaic, no change, and of course the community fund, which was in the budget we moved. So we obviously want to be sure to count all of that as apples to apples. So that's where we're at. It still says 6.94, but it's actually 3.62. Sorry for that. So taking a look at the last 5 years, again, not going to walk you all through this, but this just shows where we've been, our various tax rate, and then the proposal this year would put us at 3.62% increase. Looking, again, just this is another way of looking at that. You can see the property tax, the ballot items, all the different things, including the drop in the grand list and the final results in the bottom. Our funding basically is about 65% for the property tax for city operations, another 3% for ballot items. And then really our fees, governmental, intergovernmental generally means grants, fund transfers or funds, you know, where the water fund pays for something in the general fund or something like that. You have all this information. This is just taking a look at each departments and each categories where the funding is coming from. Generally, about 40% of our budget goes to public safety, about 34% goes to infrastructure, both maintenance and actual capital infrastructure and those kind of things. Another 12% for community services, another 13% for government services. So that's the big picture of where the money goes. There's one proposed bond, and you will be, as I said, we put off the necessity resolution, which doesn't mean that we need the truck. It means that we need to borrow. We don't have cash on hand to buy it. Just every year, people ask, why do we have a necessity resolution? It's required for bonding. But basically, this is the ladder truck. It was last purchased, I think, in the 90s. It has certainly outlived its useful life. I think we've been talking about this with the council for about 5 years now, the need for this. So it is, the time has come. Probably would not, even if we were to pass the bond this year, be at least a couple of years before we actually see the truck. So we wouldn't start paying on it until we got that. There's a huge backlog. So one of the reasons we are bonding for it now is to make sure we're in the queue. Our infrastructure goal, we just have a lot of projects. Again, they're all here. Going to go down through just so people can see the kinds of things that we are trying to accomplish in each of these goals and fund with this budget. A very large amount of work. And our housing goal, the big one, of course, is the Country Club Road project. In our rebuild and resiliency goal, we have, again, different things there, and a lot of them are FEMA projects. And advance the economy, we've got some outdoor rec tracks, Dog River Path extensions, those kind of things, and of course, a decision about the rec center. And public health and safety, we're still looking to find permanent shelters, still trying to find bathrooms, public safety radio infrastructure, the fire tower we talked about, and implement the Maple plan. We actually just spent 3 hours as a team on that this morning. That'll be on your February agenda, I think. And understanding what that means for our staff to be able to do all the work that's involved there. In addition, we certainly like to have responsible and engaged government. And so these are some of the things that we are working on with all of that. Big one there being health insurance reviews, given the cost increase. So that's a sense of what's on the plate. Like to mention this because people, I think, sometimes don't think about it when we talk about all the things the city has and does. These are all the city facilities that we collectively are responsible for maintaining, running, operating, and keeping up, so to speak. So this is the kind of the breadth of what the city does. And then just to add to that, we have 52 miles of road, 40 miles are what we call class 2 or 3. 23 miles of sidewalk, 40 plus retaining walls. We have water distribution mains, sewer mains, stormwater mains, district heat pipes, 20 bridges, 15 vehicular and 5 pedestrian, 286 street lights. So these are all things that the city takes care of and has to maintain all the time, and things that our people do. And our service demands haven't changed. Our police calls are up, dispatch calls are up, fire calls are up, the weather, roads of all those things don't change. The capital funding means we have more projects, which is good, but it also means we have to be able to do them. And we are certainly passing $50 million through our hands. So our finance department is managing $50 million in grants, funds, revenues, school funding that we collect and send to the school, and including 11 plus million in FEMA projects and about 300 permits handled. So this is big picture snapshot of the work the city is doing. And I only mention that because a lot of times people will say, if the business doesn't have money, they have to cut back. And that's true. But it's often they don't have money because their business isn't as busy as it used to be. In our case, our business is as busy or busier than it's ever been with all the projects we have and all the service calls, but we are still not in a financial position to sort of fully deal with that. So I think it's just important that the business hasn't gone away. Recreation participation is up, senior center membership is growing, parks have a steady use. So just again, indications of demand. When we presented the budget, we made clear to you that there were some things you will have to do. Some might be on the ballot, some will be things you have to do after the budget passes. So in March, once we've gone through, so we are increasing the DID rate up to cover from 5.15 to 7.6 to cover the costs of Montpelier Live and related activities. We're increasing the ambulance contract rate to our neighboring communities. We would be implementing a no transport ambulance fee, increasing our ambulance fees to match the region. Right now, our fees are lower than some of our neighboring towns, so we think there's no reason to leave money on the table. We'd be eliminating the sprinkler tax credit for commercial buildings that are required to have it. And we would be moving the community fund appropriation to the ballot, which we've already talked about. So those are things that this budget is predicated upon. So we talked about some of these cuts. So when we started with the go back to that 24%, that large number of money, these were the first revenue adjustments we made. And then we cut really all the things that we had cut last year, did not put back this year. Again, I'm not going to dwell on them, but here's the list of them. I know there are people here to speak in support of some of them. These are things that I think would all love to support. I specifically call out the Parks AmeriCorps, just that is the folks that do a lot of work in the parks. Continuing on with a lot of various operating costs through. So even before you got your proposed budget, a lot of the things in the city budgets had already been scoured pretty closely. And lastly, we had originally thought we needed 350,000 and had gone to 260,000 in the CIP. And then we had also cut positions, a Parks and Rec full-time position and a Senior Center a full-time position, consolidation of finance positions and the assessor's assistant. So 5 people, even those are listed as 4 positions. So that's how we got down to our initial budget proposal. And then with your direction last week, we've added to that, we've eliminated the position of Sustainability and Facilities Coordinator. We've eliminated the position of executive assistant in the manager's office, consolidating that with our human resources director. We're choosing not to fund the 17th police officer. That was also not funded in this current year. So that was an add back. And the police chief can speak to that. He's had difficulty filling that. We have eliminated purchasing an electric vehicle cruiser. We're still buying 2 cruisers, so the service is the same, but we'll buy 2 hybrids instead of 1 hybrid and 1 fully electric. That extra 40,000 was the cost of the additional electric and the cost of the charger. So it was a way to reduce costs without changing, and still meet the operational needs. Trim some overtime from fire and DPW to make the number hit. So that was the 409,400. I would note with the police officer that we left 50,000 in for community outreach. We are hoping to work with Washington County Mental Health to provide sort of non-police outreach to folks in need. If that doesn't work, another opportunity would be to hire the 17th police officer about halfway through the year. In January, about this time next year. So we'd have the funds for half a year. So we'd be going in, so we would have the full complement. And part of the issue here is just the difficulty hiring police officers. We've really had a huge challenge, even hiring the 60th this year. So rather than take up budget funds for something that might not get filled, we thought this might be a way to reduce the costs and the tax rate. So what's left in the budget? I just noticed this in 2019, I made a little list of what I thought we had were deficiencies organizationally, and at that time was facilities, net zero, human resources, communications, data and performance, and a social worker. 2 of them are now gone from the budget. HR has been dropped to 50%. And the social worker is probably leaving, their funding runs out in September and they'll be leaving. So that should probably have a line crossed through it too. We do have the community outreach money. That is the picture of our social worker there in the photo. So generally, like always, we are a personnel heavy operation. We have people that plow snow and dig water lines and answer police calls and fire calls and ambulance calls and answer dispatch calls. So we're very heavily personnel dependent. And that's why those costs drive our budget so much. Just taking a look at our allocations, you can see where they have changed from last year to this year and over the last several years. Tax bill, if you just took a look at the big breakdown of the tax bill, you can see how much the average home is paying for each particular service in here. Capital funding, we had originally planned 260,000 with the 40,000 coming out for the cruiser. It's only 220,000. But just because that was reduced, we are still keeping all of the paving and all of the infrastructure work. That didn't change at all. It was simply on the equipment side to change what type of equipment we purchased. And then we're still planning to continue the 260 annually to stay on our path. So employees, people like to talk about that. We are down now 5 employees from FY25, and we were down, from FY24, and we're 8.5% reduction since FY24. That's what I'm trying to say. We dropped 5 in each of the last 2 years, and we are at 111. And for some reason, FY19 keeps coming up as a year to measure against. We've got more employees since then. That year we had 112.81 employees, and this budget has 111.96. So we would be about 1 employee lower than that benchmark that we've heard that we were 10 above. So that's where we're at. This is just the employees by fund. And I only mention this because some employees are funded not by taxes, not by the general fund. So even if you cut certain positions, they affect the water rates or sewer rates, but they don't necessarily affect the tax rate. So just about 78% of our employees are 78%, 79% of our, no, that's wrong. 78.8 of our FTEs are funded by the taxes, the general fund. And then by department, this just shows the same mix of employees by department. No surprise, police, fire, public works are the bulk of our staff. That's really where the biggest amount of the work is and where the biggest amount of expense is. So looking at the budget, looking at our goals, building and sustaining sustainable infrastructure. There's a lot of things that are still in there. The capital plan is still increased. We have plans for major projects. We have cut the sustainability and facilities coordinator. For create more housing, we've continued our staff. We're actually the possible development agreements. You've chosen not to do that, so we could turn that to red too. But certainly the direct funding for the Housing Trust Fund and for Country Club Road that was in last year has been removed. For our resiliency, we've cut the sustainability position. We have no funds for MEAC, GMT MyRide, and many of these other boards, and now the EV Cruiser. Advance the economy, we've kept the Montpelier Alive funding in, but moved it to the Downtown Improvement District so that it's funded by the district that it serves. And really everything else is gone. Improve public health and safety. We're keeping the CIT program. We still have the mental health outreach. We have, the social worker position is gone. We've cut a senior center position. We have reductions in rec staff. So, and that is after a rec staff cut last year as well. And we are, again, consolidating folks in our admin functions. So it would be in city manager's office, finance, HR, those kind of things. So we've taken what were nearly 6 positions, combined those into 3. So that's it. So what are the positives of the budget? I hope we would consider it positive that we got to a 3.62% tax rate increase. That was the goal somewhere. That was the number we were trying to hit. We are fully funding fire DPW at FY25 levels. We've added the mental health funding. We've added the capital plan. And we've kept some of our basic, excuse me, keeps our basic services for residents in. I'm not saying that it won't be difficult, but most of our basic structure is still in place. Oops, why am I not? There we go. Budget negatives. Our rec park, senior center, and finance are stretched extremely thin, and we'll need to revise expectations for services. And DPW is still down a position that was cut last year. Police is still down a position cut last year. Our admin consolidations will have a big impact on the required work. The cuts we made last year are now basically built in. Some of the software cuts we've made are reducing our ability to be fully transparent to the public as much as we'd like. And, 7 people are losing their jobs. I'd focus on this too. There's a lot of frustration, I think, from our team about this, not because you have to make budget cuts, but just their concerns about the ability to deliver services to a level of expectation. And the impacts on this will be really hard, that we're going to do this now and that later in the year. I know, you haven't really taken the opportunity to talk to any of them, but they are all here, and I think they would be happy to discuss these impacts with you because they are feeling it pretty profoundly, that they are going to be responsible for something, and there will be an expectation that things will still be the same when they can't be. So it'll be good for everyone to understand what that really means, because we will be doing all we can to be as innovative and creative as possible. But the fact of the matter is there are certain things that you just can't do with less people. It's just the way it works. So what are our longer term strategies? Obviously, we need to look at health insurance. It's obviously a statewide problem, a national problem, but really hard in Vermont. We're a small state, small insurance pool. We have a lot of mandates in our health insurance system. Certainly consider additional department consolidations. We've made quite a few here, and then looking at our fees and rates, what those can be. So next steps, we have questions and comments tonight. We have one more public hearing next week. And then after that, you will approve what goes on the ballot. And we'll have town meeting day on March 4th, where the voters can speak. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Our department heads are happy to answer any questions. And thanks for giving us the opportunity to share this.
Thanks, Bill. I'm sure council members will have questions and comments, but since we're here for a public hearing, I'd like to start by opening the floor to members of the public to either ask questions about the budget or about what you just heard from the city manager, or to make comments based on about the budget and what you just heard. And I see we already have a couple of hands raised in Zoom land. So Zach Hughes, call on you first.
Appreciate it, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of things. One is, I'm going to emphasize this again, and I don't know where it can be addressed, but if your cut of $40,000 for the My Ride goes through, is there a backup? Is the state going to come in again, or how's that going to work? I cannot emphasize this enough, that there's an issue with this. The hospital is on a hill. There's appointments that have to be done up there. I'm concerned unless there's some sort of backup plan. And I'm Zach Hughes in Montpelier. I'm sorry, I didn't identify myself. So I just want you to keep that in mind, and maybe I have an answer down the road. It's $40,000. I'm not sure why we can't find it, but maybe I'm missing something. Okay, that's number one. And number two, I had a question about the ambulance non-transport. Are you planning to charge $54,000 for that, or is that a smaller fee? I was familiar with a smaller fee. And I think the homelessness task force will want to hear more about the social worker and the mental health support. So hopefully we get that at some point. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach.
Briefly, the $40,000 cut to my ride was actually last year's cut. It was just on the list because it wasn't able to be restored this year. Fire chief is here and could probably answer the ambulance question better than me, but I think we are certainly not charging $54,000 for someone for a non-transport fee. It's a fee, I believe, that if if an ambulance is called, someone receives medical treatment but does not get transported, they get billed for the medical service that they received. Currently, we don't bill them unless we actually transport them. So our estimate based on the number of calls that we had that met that criteria, that's our estimate of the revenue that we would receive for that service.
Thanks. Chief, is that
Yeah, okay, I'm getting head nods.
great? All right. Next up, we have Dave Bellini.
Hi, Dave Bellini from the corner of Liberty and Loomis. I'd like to ask questions or just elicit information about the big enchilada, the health plan, why it went up so drastically, and has it been going up? It doesn't seem to get ever talked about. I don't see any analysis about what's been taking place. Did everybody go on Wegovy, or were there specialty drugs, from a few people that had a huge spike and there wasn't enough coverage? Was it inpatient hospitalization? Was it outpatient? What were the cost drivers? What has Blue Cross done? Because they're probably supposed to do some management of their fully insured plans, not just pass the increase along and pay claims like a drunken sailor. So I don't really see anything. Maybe it's out there in computer land that I can't find. I don't see any analysis, quarterly analysis about what's been going on and what the plan is in the future to attenuate or dampen some of these increases. I'm sure people are working on it. I just don't know where to find it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I can have our finance director talk a little bit more about that. I do know that we did bid our plan out this year, and MVP was the only other competitor, and they came in higher than Blue Cross. So we did look for alternatives. There aren't a whole lot of choices, but I'll let Sarah.
We quarterly review our plan activity. Over the past 12 months, our plan activity has exceeded what we are paying in. So they aren't even making Blue Cross is not collecting their fees to do the work because our claims are in excess of what we are contributing. So part of that is that in driving the rate is our experience. The other part is there's a portion that Blue Cross is working at building their reserves back up that are inherent that we have no control over. We looked at other plans and the rates were similar to what we currently have. We have a meeting actually tomorrow with our rep to try to figure out how to bring these costs down, what our plan options are in order to reduce that. But currently, it is based on our experience along with several other factors. And so, we are working on it, but at this time, the 23% increase is the hand we were dealt based on our experience. And it is similar to what the exchange experienced this year with a 24% increase. So we were not completely surprised. And at this time, there wasn't a lot we could do.
And Sarah, a lot of this is that's what the Green Mountain Care Board approved this year, right?
Some of that, yeah. I believe it was about an inherent 7% increase for Blue Cross to recover reserves, and they expect we will see that annually. That paired with our poor experience this year led to the higher rate increase.
Thanks.
I'll just add too, because it comes up a lot, the opportunities for pooling are not really that existent in Vermont. For many, many years, people may remember there was a Vermont League of Cities and Towns pool of all the municipal governments. That pool has gone away. Most of the governments that have under 100 employees are in the exchange, which, as Sarah mentioned, their rates are about the same as ours. So it's not like they're really saving money, but that's where the pool is. So it leaves the larger communities on our own. And so we have a very small pool, which means, you know, some bad experience can really skew the pool. And there aren't a whole lot of choices. We're looking at them. Our cost share with our employees for two-person and families is, you know, employees are paying 20%. That's the same as the state of Vermont. Our single plans, the employees only pay 5%, but that cost of that plan is so much less expensive than the others. And the state of Vermont provides, you know, lifetime retiree health insurance, which we don't. So, you know, we are competing for employees in that field, and our cost share is on the higher end. Well, I don't know of any municipality that has more than 20%. And certainly in our region, we're in the higher end. So when we are looking for police officers, firefighters, those kind of things, we're on the higher end of that. So we've pushed that. We're looking at other whatever we can do to stop the bleeding. But this has been you know, it's interesting. We were looking at stuff from 2012 that Adrian sent out, and, you know, they were talking about health insurance then as being a big thing. So it's certainly an issue.
For FY25, we did have a favorable increase. It was about 1.53%, if I recall correctly. So when that came in so favorable, it's not a surprise that this year didn't.
And Bill, in terms of the caller's question about what we're doing for the future, all 4 of our collective bargaining agreements are up for renewal or renegotiation this year. And so I assume this is going to be on the table.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
All right, thanks. Peter Kelman.
Peter Kalman, Mountain View Street. I sent an email out to all of you earlier today in which I identified 7 suggestions for the city council. Some of these might be used to restore some of the somewhat arbitrary cuts that were just announced. That number, the origin of that number at the last meeting is weird. Some of these are things for the future because there's no reason to think that we're not going to be in at least as bad a position next year as we are this year. And some of these are just generally suggestions for what I think would be a better way to operate. So I'm just going to hit the main points. I won't go into the underlying arguments. 1, the city council should vote now to put a 1% local options tax on the town meeting ballot. The reasoning for not doing that at the last meeting just totally escapes me. The city council should instruct the city manager to explore every possible new revenue source and bring these possibilities to the city council for consideration for fiscal year 2027. It's too late to do that for this one, but let's get that started right now. New sources of revenue. City council should instruct the city manager to encourage all revenue producing departments to step up efforts to increase net revenues and perhaps to seek new ones. We are leaving money on the table. The city council, number 4, the city council should instruct the city manager to expand or improve regional approaches to as many services and initiatives as possible and to seek state and/or federal funding for such regionalization. I understand we are already doing some things, but we could be doing more. The towns around us are suffering, and really, if we share some of these things, it'll be more efficient for everybody. Number 5, the city council should instruct the city manager to engage all city departments in ongoing efforts to save money through greater efficiency and staff accountability. We might not have to lay off so many people if we make sure that the people are operating as efficiently as possible. Number 6, the city council should hire an independent consultant to make recommendations for reorganizing and reducing the absolute number of city employees and the costs of their salaries plus benefits, not just for this year, but for the foreseeable future. As Sal Alfano said last week, business as usual is no longer a viable option for Montpelier or any other city and town in Vermont. Number 7, city council should instruct the city manager to make a more effective effort to educate and engage the voting public in understanding the budget and its implications for their property taxes. That whiz through presentation that Bill just made is a perfect example of how not to do it. So those are my 7 large suggestions. The city council people have my detailed comments on that. And I would certainly like to hear some responses or positive or negative to what I've suggested. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Bill, do you have any? We talked about the local option tax next year, and maybe we'll talk about some more. Do you have any thoughts specifically about new revenue sources or stepping up revenue production and whether we're leaving money on the table?
Well, as you know, at the beginning of my presentation, I talked about the need to up fees. We did scour for our revenues this year. We had a fairly significant increase in revenues in ambulance billing fees. And then in my recommendations for things to do in the future was to look at our fees. So, I think we have to look at what produces revenue. Our ambulance is really our biggest operating revenue. Things like rec programs and senior programs certainly bring in revenue, and we've already sort of counted on them to cover the costs of a lot of those programs. And then there's always a fine line between that and keeping them affordable for our families and our community. So at what point do you price yourself out of the business? Our only other real revenue sources are, building and permit fees. And we certainly look at what the sort of going rates are in other communities, but there has in the past been some reluctance from the council to make our fees too high because they wanted to make sure that we were welcoming to development and not discouraging people from participating in our programs by having outlandish permit fees. So there's, again, every policy has so we look at it and we do from time to time. I think we fairly regularly scour our fees to make sure that we are collecting. We recommended eliminating the sprinkler tax credit, which would bring in another 71,000 in revenue, for example. So absolutely, I think anything we could do on the revenue side is just in Vermont. There's only so many ways a local government can raise revenues, and we push them all, but we don't charge for a police call. We charge for public records, but even then we try to be careful about that. What else do we charge? Water, sewer, district heat, those things are all user fees, but those are regular household costs too. So yeah.
And those go up at higher.
And those go up too, yeah.
At a higher rate.
Yeah, that's right, this year now, yes. So yes, I'm all in on revenues. That'd be great, but I also want to be clear that is something we look at really, really hard.
Thanks.
And also, I'll just say, I think I speak for the team. We'd certainly welcome if the council wanted to invest funds to bring in someone to look at our operations. We're always happy to innovate and look at something different. We did do that a while back and then had a citizens report follow up on that. And they had a lot of great suggestions, but there wasn't a lot of, you need to cut a lot of people. But if there are better ways to do things, we're all open for it. We want to do the best job we can too.
And if we were to pursue something like that, bring in a consultant to talk about, to examine our operations and talk about ways we could restructure. Do you have a ballpark guess of what that might cost?
I don't. The one in 2011 was $40,000. So probably upwards of that. I'd also say, and we could talk about this a lot, but we might want to think about how we can do this. We're not afraid of an outside consultant, but if you actually took a look at the credentials of the team that you have here, they're about what you'd get from a consulting firm. And we're actually putting that together to share with you. We have a lot of expertise on our team. And I think as I said to you earlier on, nobody wants to ask for higher budgets or higher tax rates. We know that we would be a hero by cutting it lower. So people are putting in for what they need to do the job that they need. And we'd be happy to work on a process and use our expertise. But we need to take advantage of the folks we have and listen to them and participate with them.
Thanks. I don't see any hands online raised now, so I'll ask for people in the room. Why don't you come on up? Sorry. Okay, good.
I'm the first one, so I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, my name is Alex Geller, resident here in Montpelier. Thanks for your time. So I'm here, I've spent 15 years working for the state of Vermont. And in that time I've worn many hats across several agencies. And the work that I tend to specialize in is change. So implementing modernized processes, how do we streamline things? How do we ultimately provide a better service for the hard-paying taxpayers? Why I'm here, obviously, is for the budget, right? We pay a lot. We get a lot, but we do pay a lot, and I know that a lot of people are struggling to pay that tax bill. But I enjoy these services. That said, I've used these services quite a bit. And I would have to say, from an external perspective, they're dated, right? If I want to rent a spot at the park, pavilion, say, it might involve emails, phone calls, paper checks, stuff like this. That was acceptable 25 years ago. I don't think it's acceptable today. And that's not actually speaking from my perspective as a taxpayer or someone who's trying to rent this spot, that it's inconvenient, though it is. It's not acceptable because that takes a lot of time at City Hall to process all that paper, to scan it, to deposit it, to record it, to figure out the schedule, to do all that stuff. It's that back office stuff. It takes a lot of work. I know because I see it every day in a much bigger organization. So, I see that externally. I can only imagine what happens for those processes, those workflows that I don't see externally, those that are internal. I wouldn't expect that they're any better. I'm sure there are bright spots. I'm sure there are ugly spots. No organization is free of them, right? So in the state of Vermont, it turns out that we pay for just standard Microsoft licensing. Perhaps City of Montpelier does for its staff as well. Turns out there are a myriad of tools that are already licensed, productivity tools that automate these processes that we just talked about. They can streamline them. They can, ultimately what they do is they allow staff to focus on far more important work, not the redundant, tedious work that nobody enjoys, but they allow the staff to actually interact with members of the public, provide a much better service. And in the end of these changes, these staff are usually much happier because they're doing much better work.
That's your 3 minutes.
Well, I'll just close by saying that there is a recipe for this. I would highly advise against hiring a consultant. I think that's a waste of money. I would also push back on whether or not you have the expertise, because I see these processes and if you had the expertise, they would be different, they would be modernized. What I would advocate for is hiring 1 to 2 or allocating 1 to 2 positions as verified change agents, people that are highly technical and know how to lead projects and execute them. This
Alex?
is not a short-term strategy. This is a long-term,
Thanks.
but
Thanks,
sustainable
Alex.
strategy.
I'll point out that after a previous meeting, the city manager and I both contacted Mr. Geller and said, well, we'd be interested in sitting down and talking to you about some of this stuff. And, it's been all budget all the time, but we still intend to follow up on that.
Yep. Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. I really appreciated the suggestion, and obviously, we're going to, we're trying to get through the budget process, but obviously we big changes in our admin operations. So we are going to be circling our wagons to figure out how we can do all of this stuff better. So, or at least able to do it because we do want to serve. So we're planning. I was going to be part of my first call after we finished the budget was to Alex and say, so I appreciate it.
Jeff Fitzgerald. You're muted so far. There we go.
There you go. So before I begin, I just want to tell everyone that how much I appreciate all the time you guys have put into this, and that I don't think everyone who's speaking is acknowledging what a terrible situation you're in. And I get it. I totally get it, that it's almost impossible to make almost anyone happy right now. I mean, that's the sad truth. But I am wearing my energy committee hat, and we've done a lot of good things over the last 15 years, and I just need the city to acknowledge what you're really doing right now, which is essentially abandoning your goals for net zero. So it needs to be said, you can't wash it any other way. You're walking away from the idea that this is possible. And I get why you're doing it. I totally understand the budget constraints. But by eliminating the position of the facilities and sustainability coordinator, and I have no problem with eliminating the 10K that we've given annually to MEAC. That's irrelevant. You really are making a decision that is really far-reaching, and I need y'all to acknowledge that that's what you're doing, and we need to be honest with each other that this is no longer a city priority, because I think if you look at the dynamics of that position and you look at what has happened, and I don't want to get into the changing of the light bulbs as being the only thing Chris has done. You all know that's not true. You all have a piece of information in front of you for what Chris has done, and the flood totally impacted what Chris was able to do. And you may ultimately come to the conclusion that you need to eliminate that position for budgetary reasons. I get it. But I also need you to acknowledge, and I actually think Bill did it because he just crossed out net zero. He just crossed it out. And as a city, I want truth. I want honesty. I'm done.
You're probably not hearing the beeper, but it just went.
Okay.
And in terms of the statement we received from the Energy Committee, what we heard from you is that through the efforts of the sustainability coordinator, we received $1.2 million grant from the Department of Energy and another 23,000 from Efficiency Vermont. Is that accurate?
Well, Chris shared with me a document that he said he shared with all of you, which laid out all of what he's done. So those were just two things. But yeah, those two things are very true.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot, Jeff. Let me see. Is there anybody else in the room who'd like to be recognized at this point? Yeah. Steve, you can get up if no one else. I'm not seeing anyone else at this point.
Is that camera on or does it matter?
No,
I
it's
couldn't
not
see
on.
Bill on.
No, it's not on. That's one of the reasons.
I didn't see you on the screen. I want to ask y'all to be careful and look at whether we're not cutting where it's going to hurt the public the most. No effort to cut the core administrative staff, which I submit is bloated. You know, we've got a city manager, we got 77 people at over $100,000 on our payroll in this projected coming year budget. I might suggest that everyone over 125 agree to a 25% cut. You know, it's like we're overly, an assistant city manager in a town this small making $174,000 is insane. It is absolutely insane, especially when you look at the productivity. I mean, basically, Fraser has delegated virtually all of his duties, you know, and some of them to lumber, some of them to, you know, communication, some of them to assistant city manager. But look at the mess that was made of Country Club Road. Look at the mess that's made of the parking ordinance. I know y'all don't want to admit that you made a mess there, but you did. I just haven't had time to litigate it yet. I don't see an answer if the parking fund is bringing in less than it's costing for those three people. Eliminate the parking, it'll help the businesses. You know, ask the businesses to park as far away as feasible for themselves to keep the spaces open for the customers. The technology outsourcing, I've seen no analysis of that. That's a gross, you know, we're paying for $300 laptops, enormous fees, and servers that we could host ourselves for remote access. Somebody pointed to how little Barry is paying for technology. I spoke to Clayton today. It's adamant. It's clear to me that Fraser rolled over to Clayton to say, no, we don't want to pay you more than $1 rent for this property, prime real estate that we planned and told the feds we were going to charge rent for. The lobby tourist information center. The state is looking for a tourist information center. That's an ideal location. It could have bathrooms, et cetera. And we have leased it for $1 and precluded that possibility. Regional dispatch. The planning, I took it up with the planning commission just to get the concept, the efficiency savings, and this regional governance is, there'll be a bill on regional governance this year. There'll be also the regional dispatch plan presented. And the fact that we're fighting against it to protect our little petty monopoly is an unaccountable petty monopoly is bad on you. You know, y'all who ignored this stuff year after year.
That's 3 minutes. I'll give you a couple of other more minutes because other people have gotten a little bit more.
We should be charging people instead of harassing the homeless for their petty, you know, skirmishes. We should be charging people for the modified mufflers and the parking in the crosswalks. Those are fundamental quality of life things in our special little village. And we don't ticket anybody for parking in the blocking the crosswalks and all the modified. We should be charging parking spaces for Green Mountain Power that's making money off of those 4 new parking places where the chargers are. They could pay for their 4 spaces, and instead we paid to put a sign up to say, you're supposed to pay the parking meter while you're paying Green Mountain Power for your charging. That's just mismanagement. That's not what I suggested last time. I said charge Green Mountain Power because they're making revenue. We need to restore some money to complete the due diligence on Country Club Road. Country Club Road is a very tight time frame if we're going to get a new town center or a growth center. We need a lot of work on the capital budget. We need a site plan, and that's not come free, and there's no skills within city staff to do that. I would support a consultant going through public works for both quality and we have some in many departments. We've got people who are coasting till retirement, and we need to figure out a delicate way of handling that. I don't have the expertise, and nobody on staff has the guts to do it. So you need an outside consultant who knows how to turn our public works, our police back into lean, clean machines. So,
Thank you, Steve.
yeah,
I need to respond to two things. One, we have very actively recruited the state for the Welcome Center in that space. So far, they've not been interested. So certainly would welcome that conversation at any time. And in fact, I just reached out to the BGS commissioner, the new one, to talk about it again. Just be clear, that is not because of inaction on the city's part. And number two, just for those that are watching, Mr. Whitaker keeps quoting salary costs. What he's really talking about is the total cost of employment, including health benefits and everything else. There are not 77 people in the city who make $100,000 or more in a salary in the way most people think about it. In the state or anywhere else, if you add, it's a good 45% add, 45% add. So the total cost is that, but our assistant city manager certainly does not make $174,000 for her annual salary with benefits on top of that. That is total all in, and that's the same. The numbers are accurate, but they are said in a misleading way. So just make sure people understand that. I'm not going to comment on the rest of it.
Thanks, Bill. Anybody else in the room who'd like to be recognized at this point? Tina, are you? It looked like you were moving toward the mic. You don't have to say anything. Okay. You are correct. The council has not decided on a budget yet. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to comment on where we are now? And is there anyone else on Zoom who would like to ask questions or comment? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. So at this point, I will close the public hearing. And I'll open it to members of the council. Palin.
Can we talk about a little bit Meals on Wheels? Is that right? A name?
Sure.
The project, because I've been receiving emails and I know that city council and city manager also.
Meals on Wheels?
Yeah.
Sure.
So because we have been
Come on down.
yeah.
Amy Pitton, come on down.
Yeah, so if any plans about it, will it affect budget proposal if we move it under the Council on Aging? Then maybe it will help us to keep another position. So thank you.
So before Amy starts, I'll just say that right now, the only city tax funding that we've got in the budget going to the senior center is for the director's position. So everything else is funded by the operation. So even if the Meals on Wheels went somewhere else, it doesn't, then the money that comes with it would go somewhere. It doesn't free up any more money for new positions. But I think Amy can talk about the meals program.
Sure.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes. So the Meals on Wheels program, which is known as Feast in our organization, sends out about 60 meals a day to people in both Montpelier and Berlin. We feed about 11 people in Berlin on a regular basis. Those meals that total up to, we're contracted for somewhere around 15,000 meals for the year. In 2024, even though I say 60 meals a day, we provided meals to 110 different people in the city, mostly because Meals on Wheels is a really important program for people who are coming out of the hospital and only need short-term help for meals. A considerable amount of our meals are for, well, I would say maybe half and half. for people who are continually get them and people who come on and go off and maybe come back on again. When the city brought, or when the Meals on Wheels program came into the senior center, I believe it was back in 2014, way before my time. It was, the model was a contract was made with a catering company to provide the meals. And then the senior center had a half-time position to kind of manage how the meals went out, manage the volunteers, that kind of thing. In 2020, I might be right about that. Kelly might have the number exactly. It was decided that that was expensive and that it might be cheaper or at least net neutral to provide the meals, to produce and send out the meals in-house. And so at that time, an executive chef was hired. A little later, a program manager was hired. Those are the two positions we currently have now. And it was promoted that that would make the income and some grant writing and things like that would cover the program on its own. Then the pandemic happened. The pandemic affected the meals program in a couple of ways. One is that the number of meals being sent out were increased because the pandemic led to that. And another thing was that the management of the program got a little squishy. So what happened was that there has been a loss in the feast program for the last couple of years. And as a result, that was found through the senior center assessment that was done last fall, in fall of 2023. And it was uncovered at that point. And another task force was appointed to look at that program and see if that idea that feast could be net neutral was still a possibility. And that report is just about to come out in its final form. And the result of that is that we think it does have that possibility. There's no guarantee. It would require some things that, just some monitoring that has not happened to this point. It might require looking for some more consistent funding, sponsorships, those kinds of things. But it's not out of the realm of possibility that the program itself could be net neutral. And so the advisory council of the senior center met yesterday and heard a preliminary report, and there seems to be a willingness at the senior center to allow the program to go one more year to see if that can be fixed. So that it will come in not costing the senior center anything. I would like to note that it is generally accepted that towns fund at least a portion of their Meals on Wheels programs. And I mentioned that Berlin, we do some meals for Berlin, and Berlin in their town appropriation to us at the senior center pays us to provide those meals to Berlin residents. And one of the reasons that I asked for 42,000 in the beginning was because Montpelier has traditionally not supported its Meals on Wheels program. And I think that's something that we need to think about, that's not the kind of town we want to be, that does not take care of its citizens. So we're going to try and manage without that happening, but I think it's important that Montpelier know that that is something that almost every other town does somehow. So, any other questions?
Thanks. Carrie.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to start off responding to something that a member of the public said about the council doesn't have a budget yet. And which is technically true. We have not voted on a budget yet. We're talking about proposals and different ideas, but I just wanted to be clear that the way we get a budget is we vote on it and then it's done. And then there's no opportunity for change. So now would be the time for input if you want to have any say over what happens with it.
Can I just dive in really quick before you all get too far into discussion?
Oh, thank you. I saw you, your hand raised, so thanks for jumping in.
That's okay. I just to inform things, I want to make sure you all know I made a definitive statement at the last meeting that apparently is not correct. The current budget as presented, since the clerk's office is made up of clerk and finance staff, given the possibility of finance restructuring, I can't guarantee that the clerk's office will be open 5 days a week, 8 to 4:30, the way it's been. I will try very hard to keep that happening, or at least to try to minimize any reduction in hours. But it is, as I've come to understand it, a very definite possibility. So just so you all know.
Thanks, John. Any other questions from members of the council? I have some questions, and this doesn't have to be the end of it, but we've certainly, we had received from the city manager a memorandum on the impact of the staff reductions that have been incorporated in the current recommendation. So I'd like to just ask the city manager to go over that a little bit so that people can understand what the impacts of these changes are. For instance, the first item on the list is eliminating one full-time position from the senior center.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, if I may, I'd actually prefer that the folks who are actually going to be dealing with this do this because I think they can explain it better. We certainly have put it in writing, but I think it would be more helpful to you and to the public to hear directly from the departments that are impacted. So I know, Amy, you were just here, but
Perfect. I almost told you, don't go away.
you want
I'm not sure. I
Paper
can pull
copy?
up what I wrote. So the position that has been cut from the senior center was in the first iteration of the budget that you received. And so that is not one of the ones that's added tonight. That position is called the Communications and Development Coordinator for the Senior Center. That position also had duties for Parks and Rec as well. So in the development portion, that person was responsible for seeking out grants, writing grant applications to support both the Senior Center and Feast, Meals on Wheels. They were responsible for writing the town appropriation requests from the 6 towns that support MSAC surrounding us. They were responsible for seeking out large gifts, for doing some planning for planned giving and encouragement for planned giving with the Senior Center. They were responsible for, we have an annual appeal that happens in the fall for the Senior Center. And so all of that fell in that job description. The second half of the job description was communications. That position is responsible for the communications that go out from the Senior Center. That is our monthly newsletter, our weekly e-newsletter, let's see, what else is on that list?
Does you do things like publish the the class schedule.
Oh,
that
the
kind of
class
thing.
schedule, yes. The development of ads for the newspapers, the social media, Front Porch Forum, all of the ways that the senior center communicates with the public. So, so in order for that communication to happen, it's going to fall back probably mostly on me as we lead. We have 2 full-time people left at the senior center once this position is vacated. And that's an administrative assistant and myself. And the senior center is quite an extensive organization. We run 175 classes for seniors every year. We serve, and those classes are filled by 2,500 people. We run 15 drop-in groups that are free so that people who are not able to afford the classes have access to socially stimulating things to do at the senior center. We do a congregate meal every week. And the loss of that position is of communication means that we're going to have to lean on the city's communications person who has just taken on with the cuts that this round of cuts, she's going to be spread across what used to be 3 job descriptions. And our communications are going to be severely affected by that, as well our ability to do any kind of fundraising. So I only work 40 hours a week, and I can't take on a whole nother position. So that's the impact from the senior center.
Thanks.
Amy, before you go, just trying to remember, does that position also do outreach for rec and parks?
They did some, yes.
Yeah.
They would do some advertising, some other things that person was doing. They did work for Rec and Parks. They were also on the crisis response team. I can't remember what the
Communications response team.
communications response team. And they also, this was only a small piece in their job description, but they are responsible for all the tech that we use at the senior center because since the pandemic, we have had to do classes. We've wanted people to still participate in classes, so we developed Zoom and hybrid and all of that kind of stuff. And that position is our tech person. And so our ability to keep those classes going we're going to need some imagination about how to make that happen going forward.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, the next position on the list, which I want to talk about, and this probably involves bringing in both Arnie and Alec, consolidate the recreation maintenance position with parks and eliminate AmeriCorps and Montpelier Youth Conservation Corps. So if you could just tell us what that involves and what the impact will be.
Arnie McMullen, Recreation Department. Reduction of the maintenance position, bringing us down to just basically 1 full-time person. It's going to definitely reduce or eliminate several functions, including mowing, trimming, and trash pickup at all facilities. So normally we try to pick those up on the trash, especially on a more regular basis, because we've been having wildlife get into the trash too. So that's gonna, make that more challenging. Maybe we have to do what the parks do and have a carry in, carry out policy for trash. Game preparation for Little League, Mountaineers, and softball. A lot of our fields, being athletic fields, have to be mowed on a more regular basis. It's not typically just once a week. The Mountaineers like their grass cut at 2 inches, which is generally 3 to 4 times a week during their season that we have to cut their grass. So that may become a reduction if we're unable to keep up with that. Rec center and senior center cleaning will probably be reduced as far as how many days we can do that. Field maintenance practices, which involves aerating. We try to aerate our fields because of compaction. The more kids and adults that are playing on fields obviously compact the soil, which doesn't allow the grass to grow as well. So we aerate. typically fertilizing and also seeding. With the amount of use that we have on our grass, it's ongoing maintenance. And if we don't do that, then you see big spots of dirt out in the fields rather than grass. Pool cleaning, prep and tear down. I mean, a lot of times when we got to get the pool set up for the season, some of you may have seen us do it. We have to drain the pool. And then we spray the whole thing down. We scrape the loose paint and try to get that all cleaned up and even repaint the pool. So again, that's gonna certainly make that more challenging. And then the last big piece, and I'm sure I'm leaving some stuff out, but the snow removal at the senior center and the rec building. We actually do that now as our staff, because when we've actually hired it out, it tends to be more costly than if we can do it ourselves with our bucket tractor, and we try to do what we can without having to bring in a contractor. And other times we have the city, when they're available, also help us, which saves money. But those are some of the challenges. We used to have a crew of 2 full-time people and 4 seasonals that we used to have for doing maintenance on our parks. And now we have more to do and less people to do it. And that's just the way it's been trending.
Thanks.
Alec.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Alec Ellsworth, the Parks Director, and for the benefit of the public, I think you all know this, but our Parks Department and our Rec Department are separate, and there's reasons that I won't go into for why that is, but our Parks Department is kind of like the natural resources wing of the city. We actually take care of the parks and the trees. A lot of people think of parks as Hubbard Park. Hubbard Park is just one of our parks. We take care of over 500 acres of park. Hubbard Park is about 250 acres, so it's less than half, in addition to 6 parks around town. And then our crew also does all the tree work for the city. So that 52 miles of roads and sidewalks, we do all the removals, pruning, planting, and general maintenance for that. So we're 4 people. I think we've always had a portfolio of work that is vastly beyond kind of what the job that we'd like to do. So we do the best we can, and we have developed, programs over the years to try to do things better. In my comments to you, I mentioned we try to catalog our sort of targets of maintenance that we have. So we have about a 9,000 hour maintenance backlog for our parks. So it's just maintenance. It's not projects or programs. And our goal is to bring that down. And then for our tree work, we currently have about a little 1,300 hour backlog of tree work. So our goal for that was to bring that down to 300. I think the best way to think about how the cuts are going to affect our department is kind of think about like a hierarchy of needs for what we do. I think at the bottom of the pyramid would be the basic maintenance work, that is in for our parks and our tree care. I think at its core, we want clean parks. We want safe parks. I think that's what we want to provide. That's what people in Montpelier want. I think that's what they deserve. So at its core, I think that's what we need to do. And I don't want to affect that at all. If you go, well, just about, the tree maintenance program, our goal with that is to provide a acceptable level of risk. There's never a no risk aspect of having trees in your city. There's always some risk. So our goal is to provide an acceptable level of risk. So those are 2 goals that I think we can't compromise on: having clean, safe parks and an acceptable level of risk with regard to our trees.
Alec, one question about the tree program.
Yeah.
Do we still have adequate ability to continue with the Emerald Ash Borer program?
Yeah. I'm not proposing that the cuts will impact that. And I think a lot of it has to do with, I don't think that's a problem that we can ignore. So we have this portfolio of work in our job. I think, not just for our department, but probably for all departments in the municipal world. It's a question of prioritizing, because there's always people will always take more. I think Counselor Haney said at some point, there's an unlimited demand for free services, and I absolutely agree. If you there's never a limit to what people will want. You have to put a limit, and making those boundaries is the hardest part of the job. So yeah, going back to sort of what we do, and maintenance on top of the maintenance would be our projects. So, the Parks Commission is kind of in charge of this aspect of our work. These are big major improvements to our park. They have a long history going back, 125 years now of making steady improvements. When Hubbard Park was, given to the city, it was just a piece of land, and they hired, people to make plans and build roads and build the tower and many things over time. Just in my 10 years here, we've done quite a lot of these projects. So those are things that have a lot of community buy-in, and, they take some of our work, that's contractor work. We do some stuff in-house. And then on the very top of that, above our projects, would be our programs. So our two big programs are the Montpelier Youth Conservation Corps and the Feast Farm, which grows food for the Meals on Wheels program. So those are both, the Feast Farm is totally grant funded, and MYCC is mostly grant funded. It costs us about $100,000 to do per year, and the city put in about $35,000. So basically a third of that. So what is proposed here is to eliminate funding for MYCC, and also eliminate funding for our two AmeriCorps members who provide full-time work for 11 months of the year. And so what the impact of that will be, thinking back to that pyramid of maintenance, projects, programs, we're basically going to eat into it from the top down. So we can't run those programs without our AmeriCorps members really make it possible to run MYCC. So we wouldn't run that program. The Feast Farm, I wish I could stand up here and say that, we're going to keep things going and we're going to do the best we can. I want to sort of hedge my language a little bit, because it's a little uncertain what the impacts are going to be, but pause or eliminate that program. I'd like to say we can continue doing projects at a slower rate, but again, a lot of it is uncertain. And, like last year, we cut the MYCC funding, we cut the AmeriCorps funding. Okay, that's fine. We're able to sort of pull a rabbit out of a hat for this year. Last summer, we were able to do those things. We found funding for our AmeriCorps members for another year. So this year, we're also removing those things. Now we're cutting a rec position and adding those duties to our staff. We're also cutting the Matt's position. So, taking communications and development work and putting that on mostly my role. So if it was just one thing or two things, I think we could say like, okay, well, we're gonna try, or we're gonna pause, or we're gonna try to keep these programs going. But at some point, we just don't have enough time to do, more than the basic maintenance. And it's a little bit, penny wise and pound foolish, I guess, comes to mind in the sense of like you cut $20,000 for two. There are two, like each AmeriCorps member is $10,000. So you cut two of those positions. Well, that's like two full-time positions for our department. And it's not just that they do work, they also allow me, my colleagues to do other work because they're doing kind of like the more basic maintenance or little projects, and they allow me to do fundraising to run these programs. Any program or project requires a lot of different skills. We kind of have like chief cook and bottle washer all in the same role in our department. So without, you're taking away some of this basic low level labor, it affects everyone in the department. And I think at some point you just can't do it all. So I think I wrote out pretty much, what the impacts are in my statement. And sorry for being so long-winded. But I think we're facing quite drastic changes to our department. And I think if you have become accustomed to seeing a certain thing out of, what we do in the last 5 years, that it's going to be different. And that's just something people will have to get used to and accept.
Thanks, Alec. Sarah, why don't you come on up? All right, now you're looking at some pretty drastic changes in your department.
Yeah, Sarah LaCroix, the finance director. We are reducing the delinquent tax collector position in finance. We are reducing the treasurer position within finance, and then finance will be picking up the assessor assistant duties. We currently have a significant workload, as Bill mentioned, the amount of dollars that flow through the city each year. Our staff does a fantastic job, but we are already stretched quite thin. I understand the budget constraints, and so, you know, my background, I'm a certified public accountant. I did 8 years auditing municipalities, so I've seen how a lot of finance departments work, and ours has a lot of great things about it already. But given that these challenges and these reductions in positions, I'm looking at restructuring our entire department to be able to accommodate these duties and to be sure that we keep a good segregation of duties and good internal controls so that we still come back with clean audits and our city finances aren't exposed. I don't think that it will be easy. In the last month and a half, I've had 2 different staff members go out with different conditions or issues. And so my senior accountant and I have been covering payroll and other different things. So it just leaves our capacity stretched a little bit as we try to keep operations afloat on the day-to-day. We will need to appoint a treasurer. You all will need to appoint a treasurer because we need to have one. I would be recommending a current staff member for that. It would be a role on top of their other duties that we would just have to be sure didn't overlap in a way that left us exposed. We will also be training another staff member to take on delinquent tax collecting, which is not an easy job to do. And then the assessor's assistant position, I will be honest, is a little foreign to me. I know what goes into it and how important it is. And so we will be working very closely with the assessor's office to incorporate that into one of my department members who has a skill set that would be advantageous for that position. That being said, as John mentioned, in order to accommodate these things, I will need to pull finance staff out of the clerk's office at least a couple days a week. That way they can have uninterrupted time to focus on these high important tasks that still need to be completed. Right now, we have walk-ins nonstop all day. People are accustomed to a face-to-face interaction with a finance staff member. People here, more than a lot of places I've seen, like to come in and pay their taxes in person, not just send in a check. And there's something to be said for that face-to-face interaction and stamping those bills and having that relationship with the community, some of which we just won't be as accessible because we have to get these jobs done. So I expect finance will look a lot different when I sit here next year during budget season. And I can't promise it won't be without its challenges. And I expect there will be many more challenges that I'm not aware of right now as we continue to work through this. But as always, our priority is to provide the best financial and fiscal responsibility for the city.
And are there service reductions that you can anticipate, like slower processing of certain payments or bills or anything like that, or is it too soon to tell that?
I mean, I expect, given the reduction in staff and the shifting of duties, that things may take longer. That's just the reality. There aren't as many of us to do the job, and it is still a heavy workload. I myself am managing our FEMA recovery. I manage our tech contract. I've got the budget and all things finance. And so, you know, I'm doing 2 positions right now as it sits. And so I just expect that there will be reductions in service, especially in our accessibility to the public.
Thanks. Eliminate the sustainability facilities coordinator position. Chris.
That's Chris. When we drafted this, DPW didn't get a chance to weigh as Kurt. I know you'd also had some thoughts on this if you want to weigh in as well. Just the impact on DPW for this. Didn't get a chance to get this. So Chris, go ahead and do your part, but then if Kurt wants to weigh in as well.
Okay. Chris Lumbra, I'm Sustainability and Facilities Coordinator. My position covers a lot of breadth. I do a lot of different things that are at the fringes of both sustainability and facilities. I played a key role in flood recovery in 23, mucking out the basements of City Hall, coordinating that work. Fire station, same thing, drying them, dehumidifiers, all that stuff. Rebuilding the city generator, the generator that serves City Hall and fire department. Coordinating a rental generator to take the place of that for the whole time it was being rebuilt. Coordinating electrical, mechanical, plumbing repairs to City Hall. We had the whole mold issue that happened up at the Country Club Road, took a bunch of time for me as well. That's a lot of what I've done there, but more recently, issuing RFPs to get finance wing and fire department put back together, selecting contractors, supervising that work. All of that work was done around Sarah's department, around active workspaces with very little interruption. Coordination work to help Mike with his temporary offices, both of them. We moved people from temporary offices multiple times, from the senior center to the police department to now to the Leonine building where Mike is. All of that stuff took a bunch of coordination as well. Other things, kind of in the immediate aftermath of the flood, we had a failure of propane tank up at our water treatment plant that, with heating season coming down upon us, we had to kind of scramble and help Kurt a lot to get the above ground tanks placed there to be able to heat that building and run the generators through the winter. What else? Broken sprinkler pipes at the DPW garage and of course, during this time period, this is stuff that probably Kurt or Zach could have done, but they were rebuilding pump stations. They were, all the public infrastructure that got hammered by the flood was on top of them as well. So where does that bandwidth, where does that capacity come from in those situations?
And could you talk about what the sustainability side of your job is?
Yeah, I'd like a little more time on.
Okay, go ahead.
There hasn't been proper attention paid to city's facilities for a long time. It's been kind of an add-on job to different people. Each department head takes care of their own building. I think Bill recommended that this position be a split position for that reason. We have roofs that are in terrible shape at the fire station, at the rec center. Police department has roof leaks, and worked with contractors to get them there to patch those roofs up and make plans for permanent repairs. Air conditioning units failing at both of those buildings. Country Club Road, last winter we had door issues, we had heat issues up there. A lot of this stuff is happening outside of regular work hours, right? I'm taking care of this evenings, weekends, nights, middle of the winter, whenever it happens. Helping Arnie with failed boilers at the rec center that keep requiring multi-$1,000 band-aids to keep these things going. So that's some of the facility stuff, still not all of it, right? Doing stuff at the transit center to keep that building in decent shape. It goes on and on. Sustainability, I have a kind of a standing partnership with Efficiency Vermont, almost weekly basis we meet. And that led to the DOE grant that would not have come to the attention of the city any other way. And that's $1.2 million benefit from DOE with a $300,000 match from the city to replace the heating system at the rec center. We're going to have air to water heat pumps with thermal storage, new electrical system, a conservative estimate of the repair work that would be needed just to keep that building functioning as is probably $600,000 just to put fossil fuel system back in that building and keep it heated. the LED light bulb replacement project, right? It doesn't seem like a big thing. But in the 17-year life of those bulbs, it's going to save the city $250,000 in energy. The bulbs were granted from Efficiency Vermont, didn't cost us anything. We're paying the installation with our revolving loan fund from MEAC. Again, that wouldn't have happened other than in replacing bulbs that were out. And you know, everybody whose facilities I've been in and will tell you that they've been living with bulbs out for months or longer. And so we're taking care of a need and saving energy at the same time. I'm sure I'm not capturing everything here, but there's a lot that I do. And I kind of alluded to this, but so much of this work that I do it's necessary stuff, and it's going to be transferred to Kurt. It's going to be transferred to Garrett, to Arnie, Eric, Amy. Everybody's going to have to work harder without me stepping in to do these things.
And that $1.2 million from the Department of Energy, is that more or less than what we pay you?
That is, it's a little more than you pay me, including my benefits. So, yeah. Yeah, I think all in, I'm 140 is where I am. So back in the napkin, the revenue and savings that I've brought to the city in the 2 years I've been in this position are roughly 10 times my salary and benefits.
Thanks. Kurt?
Yeah, I wanted to, I'm Kurt Monica, Public Works Director. Want to put a little more emphasis on the district heat rebuild. So after the flood, we lost all of our metering systems, our fiber optic communication, our remote SCADA access to view the equipment and what the pumps are doing. We lost everything. So we had multiple contractors. We had an electrician that had to come in. We had a fiber optic contractor. We had a controls contractor. We had a meter contractor that had to configure all the meters. And I just didn't have time to provide access and coordinate all that work. And Chris was really instrumental in coordinating that and getting all of that done. I don't think we would have been ready for the seeding season if you hadn't been here, because like you said, Public Works had massive amounts of infrastructure that we had to rebuild as part of the flood recovery. So I just want to put a little emphasis on that and then elaborate on the facilities. So, Public Works is made up of water treatment. Yeah. So
I'm glad you guys have that table, because I would be doing that if it were up here.
So water treatment, for example, has, I think, 5 or 6 buildings. We've got the plant itself, the garage, we've got multiple vacuum stations. The wastewater plant has 7 buildings. We've got the Public Works garage. So just in Public Works, the number of facilities, and again, some of the roofs you didn't mention, the water plant has a leaking roof, the wastewater plant has a leaking roof. Those projects, I'm a civil engineer, so my expertise is really in like municipal infrastructure. I don't have a strong HVAC background or building. So we really do rely on Chris to support the facilities aspect of the buildings. And there's a lot of them. Never mind, City Hall, Rec, and Senior Center, all the other police station. There's a lot of buildings. And this year is the first year in a very long time that we've developed a CIP plan that incorporates facilities funding. And I do have concerns about how who's going to pick up all that work. And I don't know that there's someone on city staff that has the technical expertise that Chris brings to do that work, to manage the contracts, to make sure all of it is done correctly. So those are just kind of my head. There's a lot of other things of the sustainability, just the building, the grant at the Rec of that $1.1 million. I'm not sure who's going to manage that. I'm guessing it's probably going to come to Public Works, but makes me a little bit nervous. And then the $26,000 other grant through Efficiency Vermont, Chris really pulled that together, set up a meeting up with Efficiency Vermont. That funding was for a heat loop analysis to provide dual heating between the wastewater plant and the Public Works garage through the new pellet boiler. So we were able to fund 50% or so of the design work, the preliminary design work,
to do that, which is a really, innovative way to keep the system, getting away from fossil fuels. So another important project.
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Chris. Next, we're to consolidating executive assistant, communications coordinator, human resources.
Yeah, Kelly and Evelyn will handle this one. There we go. Kelly's-
So Evelyn and I are going to get into the details, but what we're going to be talking about is just really a restructuring of the city manager's office. And it is really 3 positions that we will be restructuring. And so just on the face of it, it's human resources, it's the executive assistant to the city managers, and the communications coordinator. And so in consolidating that work, we're right now, in light of the executive assistant leaving, Evelyn and I are trying to triage as much as possible to pick up those core functions. And so I'm going to read you a little list just because it is some pretty heavy duty stuff that's essential to making sure that things happen. And some of them do have legal requirements associated with them. So just starting there, but starting with human resources, Bill mentioned in his presentation that it would really be a 50-50 split between human resources and the admin assistant work. And so we'll be kind of retooling that as we go along. But some of the HR work that's happening right now likely will either be stalled, delayed, or assigned to somebody else. And so the most immediate human resources needs will be covered, but everything else that can kind of be planned will be otherwise assigned. And then looking at the communications coordinator, some of the things like the city's website, posting local events and handling social media, as well as press releases, will be kind of split out. And that work will be a little bit tricky just because the workload has expanded as well. So Evelyn will also be taking on duties associated with the community services. I mean, the positive is that it's a little more centralized. The negative is that it is just more. And so other things associated with the crisis communication position will also be changed. So the CCRT hopefully will still continue, but we will really need to take a look at, what that looks like and how those folks respond. As it is to these positions, we're on that team. And so we've actively recruited within the existing staff to fill those positions. The crisis communication team has been really instrumental in making sure that we can respond, monitoring situations as they arise and getting information out, which is just really paramount right now with all of the things that we've been dealing with. Proactive communications, Evelyn is amazing at making sure that she gets the word out and really has made, I think, dramatic improvements to our website and making sure that that information is, current and up to date. That's not saying that we don't still have work to do, because we do for sure. But, I think that that's something that, we're gonna have to deal with. ADA compliance is another one. And so now we're starting to get into some of the really significant pieces. And then committee support. So we have a lot of committees. As it stands right now, both Evelyn and I are going to kind of split duties. And then once we sort of fold HR into the mix, we'll be kind of assigning some of those things as well. But I'll be taking on some of the council duties, or council, just to be a little more direct. And then Evelyn will be taking on the committee work. But there's just a lot that goes into tracking those committees and making sure agendas are posted and the like. I'm going to pause because I'm a fast talker. Okay. And so then just to get into some of the executive assistant functions that I think I just want to really highlight, Evelyn and I have been working with Mary to kind of download before she goes what is needed. So the doors may seem like a little thing, but it's not, because, making sure that City Hall is secure, and, getting that system underway. Public records requests, we mentioned the committee work, committee applications and street closure permits are something that will be taken on. The weekly memo, accounts payable, review of the parklets, room reservations, the welcome legislators reception. We'll be doing 4 union contracts coming up. And so any of the administrative support surrounded with those contracts will, fall onto the staff doing those negotiations. the council handbook. I think that's important just to make sure that everybody has access to the same information at the same time. And really, I mean, it is our source document for all of our policies. It's really critical. And then orientation of new council members. And then, you know, there's some other employee related items here as well. And so I'm gonna maybe let Evelyn kind of, you know, share some of her takes on these shifts, but that's kind of an overview of what this would mean.
Sure, thanks, Kelly. So I'm Evelyn Prim, Communications Coordinator for the city. I'd like to just preface this by saying, well, first, Kelly did, I think, a fantastic job of providing a really high-level overview of the specific impacts. I'd like to speak a little bit onto my workload specifically. And I also first wanted to just preface this by saying that I've dedicated my life to working in public service, and it is an honor and a privilege to serve you and to support the work of Bill and Kelly and all our department leaders, and most importantly, the residents of Montpelier. And so with that said, I think that everyone who has spoken before us has done a great job of kind of alluding to the somber atmosphere that's washing over our staff as we're staring down the barrel of this proposed budget. And the demands are significant on the staff. And so for this position specifically, as mentioned earlier, I will be attempting to span as we restructure 3 positions. And so just a little bit on the impacts on our service, as Kelly mentioned too. I had established the crisis communications response team shortly after I was hired full-time. So that group was instrumental in our ability to successfully respond to and manage the 2023 flood crisis. And the current proposed budget eliminates 2 of our key members of that team. Both were highly skilled in website administration and sending VT alerts. So that is going to be some tremendous shoes to fill as we take time to train new staff members who hopefully are existing staff members into that team. And should my position not make it through into the next budget, that team would likely dissolve. Basically because before me, the reason that it didn't exist is because the existing people just didn't have time to do it. So I have been happy to assist our emergency management team and really provide a higher level of service to our community members. So these losses will also result in 3 of the 6 staff that we had trained in sending VT alerts. So just also to clarify a little bit what that means for people who might not be familiar with the back end of how VT alerts work. So should an emergency occur when, for instance, if all 3 of the staff members right now are not available, a VT alert would not go out. And that is specifically because the responsibility is on behalf of municipalities to designate who those emergency responders, those communications emergency responders are. And so I and my team received training through Vermont Emergency Management in order to do that. It's not just something that automatically happens from the state. That's something that each municipality has to decide for themselves who is going to be those people and how they are trained and how they the process for going out. As Kelly also mentioned, proactive communication. This has been a huge part of my workload as I started here. That was the #1 desire and expressed need from both staff and residents alike, is a need for more proactive communication. And the original aim for sort of my role was kind of to be able to stay above the fray because people are so busy, to be able to put that sort of umbrella consistency over the city's communication and make sure that we're putting out information that's not only timely, but accurate. And so that all takes time and expertise. I'm a member of the National Association of Government Communicators. They're the only organization in the nation that is dedicated to public service communication specifically. And so with that membership comes professional development. And I take every opportunity I can to squeeze in webinars and conferences to make sure that I'm staying up to date on the changing federal regulations. As Kelly mentioned, our ADA compliance for website and written communications are different because we are a public municipality, and so we have to follow federal guidelines. Those are changing in 2027, and so I've been working with our staff to make sure that we are ahead of the curve to be able to meet those higher standards. And again, that all takes staff time to be able to do that. That's not something that can be automated. It is accessibility is a people heavy endeavor. And so that will definitely be impacted as my workload increases. And then as Kelly also mentioned, committee support. So when either the city manager, assistant city manager, and other staff liaisons to committees are unavailable to serve, I pinch hit and I sit in for them. And so my ability to be able to do that would also be compromised just as my schedule changes. And yeah, as Kelly mentioned, the administrative services that I will be absorbing are definitely extensive and outlined in that memo. And so I'll pause there and take any questions.
Thanks, Evelyn. All right, Chief Nordenson.
Hello, Eric Nordenson from the police department. I didn't get to weigh in a little bit on Chris and how much he means to my department and mostly to me. But he does. There's a reason we're all here, right? Because our facility is completely destroyed. Who's going to rebuild that with Chris being gone? I want to think about that. There's nobody on staff that can do it. So City Hall is destroyed. We still need to rebuild it, and we have nobody to manage that. So please keep that in mind. The fire department and I share an admin. She does mostly ambulance billing, which makes it, I do the admin. If I lose Chris, I'm now doing the building. You guys hired me to be a police chief. I do public records constantly. I do admin. And then before Chris, I was on the roof, sealing the roof. I was resetting air conditioners, things that I shouldn't be doing. I said my piece on Chris. For us, real easy decisions for me. When the decision was made that Chris was going to leave, net zero became non-existent, right? So I still believe in some of the net zero principles. I could save $40,000 and get 2 hybrids. So that was an easy choice for me. I'm getting some emails from the public about, can we raise money? Can we do this? I don't want the $40,000 if I can't have my cop back. I need people. The 17th cop will give us hope. Even if I couldn't fill it, it gave us a chance and some hope. There's probably a good 25% of us that are probably out of here in 26, 27. We need to ramp up, or you're going to be in the same boat that we were in 2 years ago with 11. I've heard nothing but we need to do studies. I have studies. The FBI puts out how many cops we should have for a town our size. It's 20, 19.2. I have 16, right? There's studies that are currently being done to tell us how many dispatchers we should have. We should have 11. I have 8. I have 1 out. I have 7. All the while I'm trying to fill the shifts, and the overtime is being criticized. I'm literally running shifts short. When we take those into consideration, then I have external factors like parade permits. And I have to do the parade permits, right? So we started to limit some of our parade permits to lighten our load for staff and also the budget. So for instance, I have a sidewalk only parade for the kids at Union School. We suggested it would be basically sidewalk only, so I could save 5 officers. So just for, my own desire to figure it out, we pumped in the numbers of how much it costs for that event. And it was $2,300 to cover us and our equipment. And I looked at the schedule that's already online at the State House, and there's 11 events posted, 9 of which are going to require street closures. So you start pumping those numbers out, there's money that I don't even control that comes out of my budget. So then I have to prioritize what's more important. And I can tell you what's more important. My staff is the most important. And if the people that work for us aren't the most important. Our priorities are all skewed. The people are most important. And I'm sending them out with 2 cops on duty, or sometimes even 1 cop on duty. And I'm getting emails from legislators asking why it's a sidewalk only permit. Right? Well, I can't afford it. And if I'm saying that I have to make my guys and girls do a parade, and that's more important than covering the shift, I'm the wrong guy. Because I'm not going to do it. So the numbers, I arbitrarily was told to cut 25 grand out of overtime. I gave you a number I needed. I cut 25 grand from it. I'm going to be over budget. I already know. The impact, if you want to give me 40 grand back for that hybrid, please give it to me for my cops. That's what I need. So that's my piece. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, we're just past, it's time for our 10-minute break. When we come back, we can have council debate on where we go from here. All right. I think we are ready to go, and Sarah, I think I'll ask you to come up and put the worksheet on the screen, or Bill, you can do that. Someone can do that. Okay. And while you're getting set up, I'll just say that I started out our discussion last week by saying to members of the council, we're the deciders and it's time to make the decisions. We've heard about the impacts of the cuts that you have asked for. And so it's now time to discuss them to see if that's where we want to be, or if we want to be somewhere else. I think I should point out for members of the public who may not be, we haven't really talked about bonding, and it may not be as visible to the members of the public, but just in the last few months, we have cut or turned down approximately $12 million in potentially bonding that we were potentially expecting to, which the $10 million for the water resource recovery facility, which we canceled last week, the $1.2 million for Isabel Circle, which we said no to last week, and the Confluence Park appropriation, which we canceled a few months ago. So I think it's important for people to recognize that your council is paying attention to all our potential expenditures and the value that they would provide to the to the city, and because all those are bonds, but they also would translate into future payments on debt service and into many years into the future. So we have any general thoughts that people have on where we stand with the budget? Okay, I'm not hearing. Go ahead, Lauren. It looked like you were raising, am I right?
Share some initial thoughts. I mean, first of all, I just want to thank the staff. This is obviously a brutal budget, and everyone I know is working so hard, looking for every angle on how we can cut costs. And I know we've got a city staff who work really hard and do essential work for our community and are really skilled and dedicated. And I'm just grateful to all of you for your hard work and all you've been doing. I mean, on this budget proposal before us, especially the latest proposed cuts, I mean, to me, I'd rather us eliminate a program, put a project on hold than do this like death by 1,000 cuts approach, where like purposely by not making any hard decision around some program or something, it means that we're just going to make every single department overstretched, unable to do the services, but still ask them to do all the same services and all the same programs and projects, essentially. I mean, I think we all have talked about a need for a broader look at systems change, and the approach we're taking, we're just going to put more work on fewer staff's plate. It's going to give them less time to think creatively. How could we change the systems? How could we get more innovative? How could we do this in a more efficient way? It's going to lead to less efficiency, less good work. So I think it's just setting us up for failure. Like, you can already hear the complaints we're going to be getting from the community about what this budget is going to mean. Sure, it's great. We've got a, 3% tax rate, but I don't think people are going to be happy with the results that it's delivering for people. I appreciated Jeff Fitzgerald and the MEAC input. I mean, to abandon our net zero commitment, we were just flooded, a climate disaster. LA is burning. Like, knowing, even if you don't care about climate change, energy efficiency saves taxpayers money. So us just saying we're not going to pursue this anymore is short-sighted. I mean, it sickens me. It embarrasses me that the capital of Vermont is abandoning a net zero commitment. And it's short-sighted because it's going to cost us more money. I mean, I think like, even considering cutting the facilities and sustainability position, a position that's paying for itself, there's literally money sitting there that we're going to leave on the table that are efficiency projects that are going to cost taxpayers more. So we are making a very short-sighted decision to cut a position that not only can it be improving energy efficiency, bring in money to pay for itself many times over, but it's also helping manage the rebuild of our flood and all this stuff. I think that's just unconscionable. I know we need to be looking seriously at the tax burden. I just think that this particular budget, like this latest slate of cuts in particular, is going to make it harder to do that. We need to grow the grand list. We need to look at projects that are bringing people to town, to bring in tax dollars. This is doing nothing to address those core things that are going to get us out of this structural challenge. They're going to make it harder to do that. So I think it's just short-sighted. I think it's going to cost us more money in the long term. So, I mean, I would at least stick with where we started coming into tonight. And I will be, in particular, disappointed if we move forward with the facilities and sustainability coordinator position cut. But I mean, I'll personally going to be opposing any of the further cuts.
Thanks, Lauren.
I'm just thinking, Lawrence, if you took the different approach, what program would you eliminate to not have to do these?
I don't want to, but I would rather, if other counselors want to cut a certain amount from the budget, that it focus it instead of saying just spread it everywhere. So every department is not able to do its job, which is what I feel like we're doing with this.
Yeah, it's true. And so we said in the beginning we were trying to avoid, and we didn't do anything about that. So
Yeah.
Well, we asked the staff really for their recommendations. And this is their recommendation, is to spread it the way they've spread it. They didn't suggest the cut of a program.
But the way the conversation has gone is we are not telling them to cut a program. If we said city council wants to cut, pick a department, a program, a project we want to put on hold, then that's a council policy decision that we need to direct them to do. Otherwise, it's inevitable that we'll get a proposal like this that spreads it out, that allows them to still do everything, just less well with fewer people. So this is what we asked for by not giving direction to do something different, I think.
I don't know. I guess I disagree. Maybe it was, you can interpret it that way, but for example, in the last week, we just targeted a number. We just said we want to reduce by X amount. We didn't say how, where. In what manner? So it could have been done I mean, a number of proposals could have been made. We could do this or that. It's not what happened. What happened was spreading the pain. And yes, there'll be reductions in services, and I'm not happy about it, but I hear every day from people who are not happy about big increases in taxes, and it looks like the school tax, in fact, will be going up, not down. It'll be over 3% increase, probably. That's the prediction. So that puts us over 10% if we stay at where we are now, on top of last year, on top of the year before that. It's just not sustainable. I don't think it is. And I understand this pain. I mean, the last editorial job I had when I started, I had 2 magazines and 7 staff. When I finished, I had 7 magazines and 8 staff. So I've been through it. And I know what it means. But I don't see us able to do this every year, just 6%, 8%, 10%. It's just, we can't do it. So we have to do something. Could cut a program. What would it be? I haven't heard any ideas. I haven't heard any suggestions. I don't have any. The reason I didn't want to talk about positions specifically is because I want to leave it to the staff who know the day-to-day and can make those decisions. I think they can make recommendations on programs. Yes, we would need to approve it, but we didn't get those recommendations. We kind of got what we asked for, I suppose.
Carrie.
Yeah, I would agree. We got what we asked for, which was do a math problem and come out with a certain amount of reduction. And we're not going to give you any direction on what work we want done or we don't want done. We're not going to give you we're not going to make any policy decisions about what we want to put what our priorities are and where we want to put our money. We just want you to do some math and make it all work out the way that we want it to work out. And I think that's an irresponsible way to do budgeting. I think it's an irresponsible way for city councilors to be managing. This is not our role. Our role is to be thinking about policy and direction and saying, this is the work that we want done. This is what the priorities are of the city. And net zero is a perfect example of that. The city made a commitment to net zero, recognizing that the reason why we are in such a terrible, dire situation with climate change is because for generations, people have said, oh, it's kind of expensive and I don't really deal with it. I just wanted to get the short-term benefits now. And the city made a commitment to stand up against that and to try to do something differently than net zero. And now we're saying, oh no, never mind. It's too expensive. We don't want to do it. We're just going to go for the short-term, quick. We can say that taxes were lowered and it doesn't really matter that we had this commitment and we're just abandoning it without saying that you want to abandon it. So I don't want to abandon that. I'm not in favor of that. I think we should stick with it. So I think we should keep a sustainability coordinator. And if the council decides not to fund that position, then I agree with the member of the public who said we need to be honest that it's because we don't value the net zero commitment anymore. And I don't think that, I think that, yeah. And I appreciate the staff sharing all of the impacts and the details of the things that will take longer, that will not get done. And we also need to be realistic about the fact that consolidating positions and redistributing workload only goes so far, and that it is not possible to just to cut 7 people and have the remaining staff just absorb all the rest of the work. And I think there is an idea out there that we have a lot of staff who aren't really working very hard or doing much or something, and surely they could do more. And it's not possible. They can't do more, or they can only do so much more. And then, I mean, I can see the Front Porch Forum posts now. What's the matter with the city? Why can't they do this? Why can't they pick up the trash? Why can't they mow? What's taking so long? And so I would prefer that we stick with the original proposed budget that we got from staff and not implement any of these additional cuts on top of it.
Helen.
So can you put back the sustainability and facility coordinator to the thing, and maybe we can see the difference? Because I know that if you want all the services and all the responsibilities, it means like 24% tax increase, right? The first kind of brief presentation build it for us. So I'm not sure everybody can pay that much increase in Montpelier. So Sarah, can you, it's a little bit, I don't know, maybe because I'm wearing this, I cannot see. What's the difference?
The estimated tax rate up to 4.77% increase all in for municipal.
And in that same row, that means that the property tax for an average residential property would go up $166.
Yeah, for the municipal portion.
Thank you.
So the difference is 1.2? Is it roughly?
Roughly.
Every 123,000 is about 1%.
Okay.
I wanted to follow up on a technical point. I'm not going to comment yet on the policy direction, but just to Sal's point about the school budget, let's make sure we're clear. It's not the total of the two. Like if we went up 7 and they went up 3, it's not a 10%. It's well, I thought that's what you just said. So that it would be up 10. It's the average, essentially the average of the two. So combined, it would be 5. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but they're together, not cumulative. Yeah. So I thought I heard you say they're at 3, we're at 7, and now we're up 10. And so I just would be actually probably less than 5 because they're bigger, half.
Can I continue to? Thank you. So, and we also said we want to keep everything for the core services, right? Police department, fire, and Department of Public Works. So now we receive like a 1 police position, right? And also like chief talk about what the over.
Yeah. So
So can we just talk about it? And like, again, I just want to see the difference because I thought that we didn't ask from that department any more, like any additional cuts.
correct. And I do understand that and assumed we'd be talking about that, Chief. I don't know if you want to come up. The difference with that is that was an add back. We didn't cut anything from what they have now. We were proposing to add a new one or one back. And so this was just saying keep them where they are now. So it wasn't reducing the current police department. It was just not, we initially said, let's increase it. So that's, as we were trying to figure this out, that was the best we could come up with. But, and you know, again, I don't want the chief to lose people if we can get them for him, but it's also been really difficult to fill them. So that's been the other piece.
So again, it's the staff recommendation, right? So I don't want to, I don't want to create very negative effect on that core service.
So Pellin, you raised a question about this, the staffing, the 17th officer, which would be an add, but you also raised a question about the $25,000 overtime.
Yeah,
and that's a cut.
That's a cut. Okay, yeah, I was just trying to, so.
And do you want to see what the impact would be if we put that back in?
Yeah, we can, why not? It's the discussion, right?
So while we're putting that back,
It's about a quarter of a point.
I'd just like to be clear about the 17th police officer. What I understand we've done is because it's been difficult to find a hire, we've said we'll put it back if we find somebody, but if we don't, we won't.
Sort of. Oh, that's a good question. So
Right?
what we said was, we were having difficulty finding people.
Mhm.
We put $50,000 in for community outreach that have been, we've
Yeah.
had the 17th officer and the community outreach, so
Mhm.
mental health outreach. We think we're gonna have difficulty finding that. So what we were basically saying is if we can't get community outreach, $50,000 would buy us roughly half a year of a police officer. So we get the 17th officer, say in January of next, this time next year for half of the next fiscal year, and then it would be in the budget for the following year. So I think it was that
Only if you can't get the 50.
or we could just say we're putting 50 toward a police officer and not do the outreach. I mean, you can do it either way. We'd have to assess which was more important. I'll let the chief speak to that.
Again, Eric Nordenson from the police department. It's a tricky police market right now, right? And if you're not watching the news, like what's happening in Burlington and different communities, those people might become free agents today and tomorrow. So I'm really nervous to like give it totally up. I think January bought us some time that if the opportunity came that I could get somebody and 2 or 3 people were leaving different departments, keep in mind that same thing can happen to us too, right? 2 or 3 people. That this is a market for police officers. When you ask how much police officers you could be paid, it's going up and it's going up and it's going up because we are so hard to find. So I'm nervous. I'm nervous to not ramp up, and I've been pretty clear with that. I'm really nervous about what happens, you know, when a couple of us older fellows and girls take off, which isn't that far away. So my plan has always been to make sure that they didn't have a gap in service, and the way things are trending right now, there's definitely going to be a gap in service unless something changes. And I'm just trying as hard as I can to make sure that doesn't happen.
And Burlington's trying to expand, right?
They are, but look at the environment that they're working in, right? And
Not easy, yeah.
yeah, no, it's not easy.
They've been trying for a while and they're like 20 below where they want to be, something like that.
They're significantly below, and you know, Berry City's short 5. You know, Northfield has a $15,000 sign-on bonus with free healthcare. Berlin has free healthcare. You know, we're paying 20%. We are the highest payer of insurance in policing. So when I hear all this stuff, I was like, I can't compete. We could offer a sign-on bonus, but I always felt like that's kind of like the cable gimmick. You know, you have the new cable customer gets the great deal, and the person that's been loyal all this time gets nothing. So we felt as a management team that it was best to reward the people that were here and create a really good environment, as good as we could with training and community that would have people want to be here, not just for a $15,000 or $20,000 sign-on bonus. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
To other city councilors. So I mentioned that and Bill said no, and I understand the reason. In the last meeting, can we just create some kind of between like a maybe half-time position for sustainability and facilitator, coordinator, and we just, I don't know, I'm just trying to find some way keep like all the positions for future needs, but at the same time create a balance between tax increase. So sorry, I'm asking the same question, but like, can we just like create some, I don't know, flexibility? Because yeah. I know the answer, but I wish something else. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I agree.
So when I, after our last meeting, I went back and just pondered our conversations and around, what Carrie brought up in terms of taxes versus values. And, I went down this whole rabbit hole of researching, where are we as a city and how do we compare to other cities, which feels like it's a slippery slope because it's not comparing apples to apples, which it is not. It's a very, very difficult analysis to do in terms of positions, budgets, healthcare, job descriptions, job titles. Every city is different in terms of how they're set up. And so once I was going through that research, and Bill alluded to this, I was sent a report that was done in 2012. And so in that report, the city council commissioned a committee of over 20 people, over 100 of hours doing this analysis. And it's like Groundhog Day. We're still talking about the same issues 14 years later. So it's not just a tax increase in 2026, it's cumulative over the past 4 years that I'm concerned about. And so when we look at this report, I mean, this clearly states our city wants to focus on roads and infrastructure. Like, it's exactly what we're talking about today. It's, we want, you know, to fix those potholes. We want to fix these roads. We want our water infrastructure fixed. I mean, it is very loud and clear from 2012 what our city wanted 14 years ago. And so, and so with that in mind and thinking about where we are now, and they wanted housing, they wanted to add to the grand list. Like, it is exactly what we're saying present day of what we wanted 14 years ago. So it's not just about, you know, this tax rate that we're talking about. It's about where we were 14 years ago, where we are today, and how do we really overcome this narrative that has been repeated for 14 years? And how do we get to that point where we do fix our potholes, we do focus on our water infrastructure? I mean, we're making headway, but we haven't thoroughly invested as we should have over the past 14 years. And that's why we're still having this conversation. And I think that's why we're in this very, very difficult position, because I mean, I feel like if we, you know, I mean, there was probably reasons every single year that we cut the capital plan, we didn't invest in paving, we didn't invest in water infrastructure, but those were difficult conversations that should have been had that didn't. So now we're sitting here looking at these positions of our friends and neighbors and, you know, values of our organization of net zero. And, you know, I think we do really need to make tough decisions, because the previous councils didn't. And we're still having these conversations, and we haven't made a huge amount of headway because we're still talking about it. And it's this is all I hear from my constituents is, I want the, you know, the roads fixed. I want my water main breaks to stop going. I want housing to be developed. So how do we get there? Like, how do we overcome this burden and this hurdle of having these really difficult conversations, talking about positions being cut, while still focused on the values of housing and infrastructure and, you know, safety? I just feel like we're just going to continue this vicious cycle that I read in this 100-page report from 14 years ago. Really just discouraging.
I'd like to offer a little perspective on that, having, you know, been here all that time. I would submit that every single city council has wrestled with the same thing you're wrestling with. I would not say that they made bad decisions. I'd say they were trying to balance the tax rate, the need for services, and how much they could afford. If you look back over history, you'll see that, well, we're in the third cycle of it. 2 prior versions of councils did extended increases of the capital plan, one over about 8 years, one for about 6 years. Now we've started another one. Part of the problem is, you know, certainly we've seen in the last few years, is that the costs rise. We had to make drastic cuts for COVID and drastic cuts for the flood. So that is our current problem. We were catching up to where we needed to be with that. With water and sewer lines, and this isn't just for you, Adrian, it's, you know, a lot of people talk about this, and I think it's important to understand. So the city staff brought that issue to the council in the mid 2000s, late 2000s, maybe even 2010s. I can't remember. I have to go back and look. Recognizing this was a problem, and the city council created a committee of themselves and the finance and to figure out how we could address our water and sewer infrastructure. And their conclusion at the time was that to do what needed to be done would require raising water and sewer rates so high that they didn't want to do it until the bonds for those water treatment plant fell off, which is about now. And so they created what we call the 50-year plan that began to add 1% for infrastructure on top of the budget, which we have been doing every year since. So they knew what they were doing. It wasn't like they were like, we can't afford to do this now, but we can see a path in the future to do this. So we're going to create a plan, we're going to fund it, and then we've been adding to it in the budget. And hopefully we're gonna get $2 million of federal money. So yes, we're behind in the water plans. Someone mentioned that in 1993, they were talking about that. I don't know, that was before my time, but I do know that we were building a new water treatment plant. It wasn't built till after I was here. And so the city councils at that time said it's more important for us to have clean, safe, healthy water than the water that was contaminated going through brand new pipes. So they made a priority decision at that time to build our treatment plant, clean the water, and then deal with the pipes. And, I wasn't here for that, but I would say they made the right call then, and it would be the right call today. So now we're dealing with the pipes. So I get it. It's difficult, and we offer a wide array of services. And people want rec, and they want the senior center, and they want the parks and the trails, and they want good police, and they want fire. All of those are costs that compete with the capital needs. They want housing. We have our planning department. We didn't touch them because they are doing all the housing. We've purchased, we have been trying to be innovative. We could give you a long list, the public, a long list of things that have been done. But every council's wrestled with this decision, and they've come down where they've come down. And some have come down harder on cutting costs, and some, and raising more infrastructure, and some have come down harder, more on the side of delivering more programs and services. But they've all had the same conversation, because those are the same issues. And it's, what do we want to propose? What's the right balance of all of this? And that's what we struggle with every winter. And that is what they were struggling. I went through it where I'm actually writing an update. The one thing that I found in that report and in the matrix report that it was based upon, and yes, they are 11, they're years old, but we're still talking about them, right? Is they didn't say, here's really obvious places to cut. Here's where all the waste is. You should just stop these programs and you should stop these things. It was, gee, you got to find a way. Gee, you should really work to cut costs. There were a lot of that, and not we found these inefficiencies. We keep digging into those all the time, trying to do them. So I get it, but I can't sit here and have it said that prior people made bad decisions, or that they made the wrong ones, or they avoided them because they confronted the same conversations and we as staff do. We're trying to get it right. We got told to cut $409,000. We didn't say cut a certain program or don't cut a certain. I asked a lot of times, what guidance can you give me? And it was, don't cut police, fire, and public works. And we've tried to stay as true to that as we can and still deliver everything that we're delivering and come within the numbers. And is it perfect? No, of course it's not perfect. I mean, honestly, the 6.94%, I realize it's high, but that wasn't perfect. There's still a lot of these cuts we talked about were in that budget. So we understand, we struggle with this. I mean, the stuff that we cut before you and every other council ever see it is very difficult, because we know, and they know, the folks you just heard from, that they're going to be called upon to deliver the work. And yes, they're going to be called on to fix the broken water line, and they're going to be called upon to pave the road too, but they're also going to be called upon to plow the road and to, make sure that the clean water is running, and that the sewage treatment plant is functioning, and that the fire calls and ambulance calls are running. And so, yeah, I'm sorry for the rant, but I think it's really important, as we're at this really tough time. Where we're at is where we have been a lot of times. It's just a whole heck of a lot worse this year because of the sort of confluence of financial situations we find ourselves in. So the stakes are much higher, but it's the same problems. I'll be quiet.
Tim. Follow the brand. I guess the thought would be, we do want those basic services to maintain. Yes, when we call for an ambulance, we all want the ambulance to show up with skilled people to help. But we have to look at it, and in this budget, no matter which version we take, taxpayers are going to have to understand this isn't what any of us want, and you're going to get fewer services. And we're going to have to say no. And businesses, even though, like your earlier analysis, we've all had to cut back and make changes. And if we don't get paid, we can't pay our taxes. So in the public sector, people just keep asking, and the people working there try their best to provide the services, but we have to contain it. We just have to. So maybe if there isn't always somebody there to stamp the tax bill when they make their payment, it's a wonderful archaic thing, but it really doesn't add value for anyone. And unfortunately, those kind of pieces are going to be lost.
Yeah, and I understand that. We understand that, and we understand this problem.
Yeah.
And we're trying to find a number. Our job is to make sure you all have been briefed on what the potential impacts of your decisions are before you make them and decide if those are acceptable or not. You, at the end of the day, you make, not us.
Yeah.
You decide where the priorities are, how much to fund. All we can do is say, we're here to deliver the services that you choose at the level that you choose, at the funding level that you choose. And we need to make sure that we're all doing this with open eyes. And once you tell us what it is, we'll do the best we can to make it work. But we want to make sure we've had this conversation now. So when the Front Porch Forum post comes, or when the person is in front of our council in August complaining about something, that at least the 5 of you that are still here are saying, yeah, we knew that. We made that decision last winter, and that's the way it is. And, we've got the staff's back on that. We can't be hung out to dry saying, oh, well, I don't know why they're not doing that.
So maybe I can wrap up. But so basically what I was thinking is, we're certainly, I think the staff, you all did what we asked you to do, and we really appreciate that you've done the analysis. It's a budget that's going to take, if it goes, you're not going to be able to support 30 committees. And we've talked about committees before, but the number of committees that have to be supported is going to have to be reduced. I mean, there's just so many layers of this. But then that's one example. I guess, so anyway, to cut to the chase, I think the budget is proposed with the last group of cuts and adjustments, the total 4094, which I believe in the notice that's in our agenda tonight specifies it's a budget of $12,136,400 after these adjustments are made.
That's the municipal tax portion after other revenues and exclusive of the ballot items.
Okay. So to make a motion to approve budget as proposed with these changes, that would be the number.
That's the amount we need to raise, correct?
Correct. Okay, so I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? And Tim, before we go any further on this, because we need to split that motion into 2.
Okay.
We need to take the city clerk's portion out of
sorry,
it to
yes.
make that a separate motion.
So how do we do that? Can we just make the motion saying pull the city clerk's budget out? Or do you
Remove all portions of the budget as proposed except the city clerks.
Yeah. So that's the motion.
Yes.
As seconded, the budget, except for the city clerk's budget, as proposed tonight, or coming into tonight. And it's been moved and seconded. Are there any proposals for any amendments to that? Because we have heard some discussion tonight of the sustainability coordinator and the 17th police officer, Lauren.
Propose an amendment that we add back in the facilities and sustainability coordinator.
Is there a second?
Second.
And is there any discussion of that motion?
I would like to avoid adding things back in an incremental way. If we're going to add, I'd like to get them all into one motion and then decide that way. So are there any other additions that councilors want to make?
Well,
I don't know that it makes any sense, but if my proposal would be that we don't accept any of these cuts that came into us today. So, but I don't think procedurally it makes sense for me to propose an amendment to the motion because contrary to what the motion is actually
Yeah,
saying.
I don't think that would be, I don't think that would be in order because it would just be to negate the
Right,
entire motion.
Right, right.
So Sal, I understand what you're saying. However, we have a motion for the budget as it is, and so the way you get back to, the way you make a change to that is by moving changes to that. And this may or may not be the only change, but there could be people who would support this add back, but not other add backs. And so I think the only way you can do that is by taking them one at a time. So we've talked about it a lot. Is there any further discussion or are we ready to just vote on this? All right, let's vote on it. All those in favor of the motion, and this is to amend the main motion by adding back $141,827 for the sustainability and facility coordinator. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Did you vote aye?
Yeah.
Helen? And so, did you vote aye also? All those opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Okay. So now the motion has been amended to add back the 141,827. Are there any other motions to amend? Are we ready to vote on the main motion? If so, and the bottom line now is what? Okay. 4.77%. And the dollar amount, are you just gonna fill in the dollar amount before
Yeah.
next? Okay.
We gotta do it again next week.
Yeah. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Oh, this is
So, well, that we're voting for the motion.
your motion as amended.
Okay.
Yes, the main motion. Because I asked if there were any other amendments. No one else
Yeah.
moved an amendment.
Now we are 4.77, right?
Right,
Okay.
the full budget
Okay.
as proposed, setting aside the city council, the city clerk.
Yeah.
Does everybody know what we're voting on? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, so it's 3-3. Is that right? No?
No, it's.
Is it 4-2?
Yeah, 4-2.
Oh, okay. And the motion carries. Wait, 4-2, no? Okay. I was having a hard time hearing who was doing what. I probably should have asked people to, probably should have done a roll call. All right.
What was the vote?
2-4, yes. So no. So it's 2 yes, 4 no. Let's have people raise their hands to be clear. Who voted yes?
So I said yes for this 4.77.
Right. How many people vote yes to that? Okay. And how many people vote no? Okay. All right. So we're going to stay here. Until we have a budget. So who has a proposal to make? Lauren.
Change my vote to send this to next week. And I mean, people could think about further, but since it seems like 2 people are voting because they want it to be lower and 2 people are voting against it because they want it to be higher, this might move the conversation forward. If I don't know that we're going to come to an agreement tonight on somewhere in the middle or something, but it wouldn't then give us for example, the funds necessarily to restore a position. So I don't know what that gets us.
Mhm.
So.
So
would-
you want to move, change your vote?
I might
to yes. Or do-
I mean, does anyone have, I don't want to preclude if anyone has any ideas or alternative motions that might get us somewhere different, but
I think because I said yes, I want to hear from people who said no, because I'm okay with this proposed budget. So I don't know what are the alternatives, because there were like no's.
Okay.
My quick reaction is, it seems like, at least for part of the town that I'm involved in, where I pay parts that I pay the bills for the property taxes, it never seems to quite line up with the percentages we have at these meetings and what I think my tax bills go up when I actually have to get them and have to pay them. And I think as I look at this package and say, okay, so if it was 3.62 after all the cuts, which we're not at the moment, but for like the core downtown area and areas that are still pretty vulnerable, we're also not doing the sprinkler credits, which is effectively an increase for those properties. And contrary to what Bill has said a few times, not all the owners that have sprinklers in the buildings have to have them in them. A number of us have put them in by choice to make our buildings safer. If we built a new building and we had to put it in, yeah, we'd have to do it. But no, we've done several, and
No, I mean, I think we can check on what the goal was to.
but it's an increase in taxes on
Right, but
properties.
the goal was to waive the credit for those that have to have them. So I think we could look at, for people that put them in voluntarily that aren't required, we could take a look at.
Anyway, but the way I'm looking at this budget, the way I'm understanding it, it's an increase for the downtown properties for the people that have done the right thing. And those that haven't, just get away with not doing it. And then the other piece is the downtown assessment district. It's stayed pretty low and under the radar over the years. But again, it's also another increase on that same group of properties in a really vulnerable part of town where we've got a lot of apartments for some of our lower rent apartments and a lot of people that are in town that don't have cars. And that's the place we're going to be piling it on, and we're going to be having to raise their rents. There's just not a balance in this thing for me. And I know there's not a balance in a lot of ways for a lot of people, so I appreciate that. But I do think that the number we're talking about, the 4.77 or 3.62 or whatever, it's more than that. And I'm just trying to brace for that, because we've had a few years of big increases already. Water and sewer rates do go up every year at 1% more than CPI, which is a good plan. But it's also another significant increase every year. And they all have to be absorbed.
Did anyone else who was a no vote want to take Palin's invitation to explain where you're coming from? And you don't have to, of course. Lauren.
I mean, again, if someone's having some inspiration for another plan, I mean, I'm just still concerned with like the 17th officer, like some of the cuts, especially that came in tonight, I think are problematic. So that's why, but I will, do I do a motion to reconsider, or how do I, do I just do a new motion with
Oh,
like?
that's a good question.
Because I was on the winning side, so I think, well, I don't know. Could reconsider my vote.
Well, we could ask the parliamentarian.
You think that it has to be somebody from the
winning
winning side can make a request. And I don't know if it has to be within this meeting.
It does.
That's what I thought. Yeah, I think so. I think that is the way to do it. It needs to be within this meeting, needs to be someone who is on the winning side can call for a reconsideration of the motion.
All right,
So is that your motion?
so I do a motion to reconsider my vote,
To reconsider that action.
reconsider that action.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay. It's moved and seconded. You have to decide, you have to vote to decide whether you're gonna have a revote. And then we would have the revote, right? Because that's what we're doing.
Vote on what?
On,
The motion.
on the motion that just failed, Tim's motion as amended.
The 4.77.
Okay, so the motion is, should the council reconsider the vote that defeated Tim's motion? And so a vote yes is to give you a chance to reconsider, a vote no is to not. Vote, for those who vote, I'm gonna go down the line. Lauren,
Yes.
Palin,
Yes.
Tim,
No.
Sal,
Yes, I'll vote to reconsider.
Carrie,
Yes.
Adrian.
Yes.
All right. Now, you have voted to reconsider the motion. Now, the motion before the House is, should we adopt a budget at the level that Tim moved, or as amended? So that's the 4.77%.
Minus the clerk.
Minus the clerk.
Minus the clerk's budget, yep. And we'll do this same, we'll call the roll, Lauren.
Yes.
Oh, did anyone want to have any more debate on that? I think we're where we need to be, but go ahead if anyone has debate on it.
Just want to make clear. I mean, I continue to have concerns about this budget, but this gives us something to talk about. Next week, we'll have another public hearing. If people have additional ideas or anything, we still have another chance to do some final refining on it, but this just allows us to, if nobody's having any like brainstorms tonight, then we don't have to just keep sitting here and staring at each other. So this is why I'm moving it forward. And I think it's, getting within a ballpark. I'm hoping a majority of council can support and send to voters. So that's why I'm going to vote yes.
Palin,
Yes.
Tim.
No.
Sal.
No.
Carrie,
No.
Adrian.
Yes.
So now it is 3-3. And I do not think this is a responsible budget, but I will vote yes to break the tie because I think that we need to move forward to next week with something to put before the voters. Now, the chair would entertain a motion to fund the city clerk's office at the requested level. And Councillor Brown will not participate.
I will recuse myself from this discussion and this vote.
Is there that motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so now that's where we are. Before we move on to the remainder of the agenda, which isn't much, but before, I just want to observe that that part of the reason that I think we're kind of at a standoff or we're really stuck is that we're being told that we have these cuts being proposed as a way of restructuring or right-sizing our city government. But we're making cuts without making plans. Less than a year ago, the city council spent months reviewing the operations of all our departments and then unanimously adopted our current priorities. Maybe it's true that plans exist to be changed with the circumstances, but that does not mean saying no to services and people without knowing what is necessary and what is the best way to provide those services. We'll be here after town meeting day, and we will once again gather and hold meetings to discuss, to develop our council priorities. If there's sufficient support for it, we can begin a study right then of the structure and functions of city government. We've done it before and we can do it again. But until we have done that, I do not think we should be cutting our budget just to make cuts. And I think that we may be facing the same problems of moving forward with with the sensible budget next week. Because we haven't confronted that fundamental question. But that's a discussion for next week. We will move to council reports. Adrian.
You have to have the first public hearing on the warning.
Okay. Oh, okay. I was thinking of that. That was the necessity. Okay.
That was the budget.
Okay. Item 8, first public hearing on the warning. I will open the public hearing.
So every year we have a warning that voters vote on. There's a draft of the warning in your packets and online. It's pretty standard to what we have every year. Obviously, the school district budget, we don't have their numbers yet. You're still finalizing your number. The number that's on that paper was based on the budget we came in with today, so that would change for next week. Everything else is really the same, except for Article 11 does reflect the new funding for the Downtown Improvement District. And we have the ballot items moving the community fund to the ballot. And then lastly, you had voted to add the tax stabilization expansion authorization onto the warning earlier this year. So that is on as Article 17. So call that out because that's, it's specific based on an earlier vote that you had taken. But obviously you can still choose to add it or take it off. So basically this is like your first reading. You get any comment that you want about these ballot items, and then you'll have to approve the final ballot next week, along with any new petitions that have come in.
Is there any comment from the public on the construction of the warning? It's kind of.
I'll make a brief comment that I think that opening a public hearing at 9:30 at night is part of this charade of engagement. You're going through the motions and nobody understands in the viewing public that the implications are what they should have paid attention to or even comment on. And it's reckless, it's irresponsible.
Is there any other member of the public in the room or on Zoom who would like to make a comment in this public hearing?
And there will be another public hearing on the warning and the ballot budget next week.
All right, I will close the public hearing. And now the chair would entertain a motion to approve the draft warning. Or do we approve or move it to a second public hearing? So the motion is to hold a second public hearing on the draft warning. So moved. Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thanks. Thank you, Bill. Now, city council reports. Adrian, Carrie?
I just want to acknowledge all the folks out in California who have lost their lives and lost their homes, and thousands of people who and communities that are just completely destroyed and no real end in sight. So I'm just thinking about them and sending, I don't know. Just wanted to acknowledge that.
So. Tim. Helen.
No report.
Lauren.
I just wanted to let folks know that I'm going to be wrapping up my council term and I'm not going to be seeking re-election. It's been a real honor to serve for the past 6 years. Really grateful to folks who elected me to represent you all and being able to work with the council and the city staff. And I can share reflections of my last meeting, but just wanted to let folks know and thank everyone.
Thanks, Lauren. Don't have much of a mayor's report. You've heard a lot from me tonight. What I will say, I think it's important to say, is that we have heard allegations tonight that our city staff is ineffective and we have problems with people who are just coasting toward retirement. And I just have to say, from my perspective, having worked with city staff as an advocate, as a council member, and as mayor, that I think that is just false, unfair, and disrespectful to our city staff, who I found constantly have done great work under difficult circumstances. And I do not want to hear people denigrating their work. We are up to city clerk.
Yeah, just a reminder that next Thursday at 5 o'clock is the deadline for ballot petitions, for ballot questions to come in. And then the following Monday at 5 is the deadline for candidates. And also a reminder, because I've had people come to me because they've forgotten this, about positions on the ballot, that in Montpelier, as per the charter, for city positions on the ballot are drawn by lots. So just to try to get in front of that question a little bit this time. I've had, in fact, when I ran the first time, there was, I was second in alphabetical order, but I ended up getting drawn to be at the top, and there was some pushback about that. So that happens sometimes.
So
Just a
John,
reminder.
will we be warning a meeting of the Board of Civil Authority for that Monday at 5 or 5:15?
Yes. In fact, that warning will go out Monday.
Great. City manager's report?
Again, remind everyone, we'll be back next week. I think we're at the senior center next week. Is that right? Yeah, that counts. School board's in this room. So upstairs at the senior center, it is elevator accessible. And then I think it sounded like everybody could do February 5th for a special meeting for my review. That seemed, from what I heard, so confirming that, and we'll go forward with that. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you, folks. And we are adjourned at 9:46 p.m.